Attention, please.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
What's going on, everyone? It is David Palmer, the Leo King, and Dr. Ann Wohlcke here with History in the Stars, the astrology of 1054, the Great Schism, and Supernova. It's going to be really, I think it's going to be a wild show today because who would have known that we would find the astrology that actually is very similar to the last episode we did of 1534 and the wild parallels of even then and then bringing all those to now. So this is going to be even going farther back in history. But actually, I think Ann and I discovered some extremely powerful history here for us to really pay attention to. And I think people are going to really align with it. How are you doing, Ann?
I'm doing wonderfully. I'm loving that we found this topic. I had no idea we'd be talking about a supernova today and everything that went along with it. I had no idea we'd be going back to 1054.
I know.
So I'm excited.
Well, and I think, you know, it was like that last episode we did, getting a lot of great feedback. It's doing great on socials, doing great on High Vibe. I think going into the popes and looking at that period of such a big shift, and to see the astrology be almost exact for this moment. We're actually filming this as the conclave has just begun at the Vatican. And it's interesting because even the parallel events of 1054, ironically enough, was about a pope too, and a pope that ended after this whole thing, and also a bigger schism, which is exactly what happened in the Catholic Church of King Henry VIII schism. But this was actually a bigger and wider schism of the church itself about the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Western view, which we would call today the Catholic Church. So the Western ideologies, and it was about doctrine, it was about theology, it was about the way that the canon law was looked at. And it's mind-boggling because the astrology is hitting the same tune. And it was all because you got the one from 2 weeks ago, and then I was just like, we got Jupiter coming into Cancer. It's going to square Saturn and Neptune. And I think maybe I'm paying more attention to that because my son's due date is around that time. So I'm like, been thinking about it a lot. And then you came in here and I'm like, well, let me just run it real quick and let's see, you know, Jupiter and Cancer, and I'll just keep it real simple. Saturn and Aries, Neptune and Aries. I won't even run it as a square. And it popped up with a Pluto and Aquarius time. And you were the one who said, well, look at that year, 1054. And that was when I went, I can't even, Pluto and Aquarius too. So we're going to show that right now to people.
All right,
because
good.
it's just one of those things that you just go, wait, what? So I have it right here. Here we go. Screenshot. Yeah. So we were on Solar Fire and we did do this. So I was like running the basics here. Jupiter in Cancer and Saturn in Aries and then Neptune in Aries. So in the time frame that I'm searching, so people know, so I'm searching all the way back 4500 BC and then going all the way to 2500 AD. So I'm actually covering 7,000 years. Okay. What's really interesting is the way that the program puts it out. So we actually have to start at 3537 BC into 3536 BC. That's okay. The last time we just had those three planets there. It's not even about an aspect. But Saturn, Neptune, Aries, Jupiter, Cancer. Then it was 2066. So that's a 1500 year period. Then it's 917 and 916, same year. Because if you notice that you're going to see that it's all within the year cycle of Jupiter in the sign. And Saturn, Neptune not switching signs too. That's kind of the interesting part. So that is another 1,000-year period. It's about 1,100 years. And then we get to a very close one, which is it's not. It's another 1500 year cycle, 555 AD. And then, so actually the closest back-to-back cycle there ever was 555 into 556 AD to 1054 AD. And it's so weird because that is the date that was the only one that it hit one moment. It didn't have another moment of that. And it happened to be with Pluto and Aquarius, ironically enough.
Again, in 555 also? Or
no, actually, I haven't even looked. I didn't even look there yet, okay. Right? But because we ended up in 1054 and we were able to get everything that blew our mind.
Yeah.
But what's ironic is then since that date of May 23rd, 1054, that was actually because Saturn ingressed into Aries. We'll show that chart at 000, which we're about to go through on May 24th.
Really?
Yeah, even though I know it's different timing as far as calendar goes.
Yeah, but okay, so it happened back then, you're saying in May?
Yes.
Okay, and we're going through it again on May 24th.
Yes,
and it happened,
with Saturn in Aries, and then Jupiter comes into Cancer in June.
That's so crazy. But I remembered looking at that because it was, back then it was my dad's birthday, which is May 23rd.
Oh yeah.
And
right.
so now it's on my ex-mother-in-law's birthday.
How interesting,
May 24th.
right?
Anyway.
Right,
yeah.
So then for us to have this astrology, it starts June 9th, 2025, September 1st, 2025, because that's the day Saturn, ironically, is going to retrograde back into Pisces and leave Aries at that 0 spot. So that's kind of interesting. And then it comes back February of 2026, and that's going to be the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. That's going to be on the 20th, so the February 13th. And then June 29th of 2026, before Jupiter leaves Cancer and ingresses into Leo. Then there's nothing for the next 500 years, and I didn't run up into the 3000s or anything like that. I mean, we're looking at 7,000 years. But in all total, it's only hit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, and we're the 6th turning. And that's it in 7,000 years.
And there were some major things that happened in 1054 when that hit. When that's the last time it happened.
Yeah, so I'll pull up the chart real quick of May 23rd of, we're going to do this as the 1054 Supernova. And it was on May 23rd of 1054. And you know what? I'll do it for Italy. We'll do it in... Although back then, I think...
What are we looking at?
I'm trying to think of the Catholic Church at that time period. I think because there was Constantinople still.
It's still Rome.
It's still Rome.
West,
so
yeah.
I guess I'll put it for Rome. We'll just do
It's the
that.
Bishop of Rome is the Pope.
Yeah.
So
that's why we have the history professor on here. I don't have to guess. It's a very beautiful thing. We all don't, together. It's the beautiful part. So let me save that as a sample. Okay, yeah. So let's take a look at this chart together with everyone here. Let's look at this from just a simple wheel. I'll push this a little bit more in the middle. There we go. Okay, so... and I have to change the time because that was the thing that Saturn ingress into Aries happened. So that's going to be, I don't know, like 20, 30. Oh, it's still down there. That's so funny. 11:30 p.m. I think that'll for sure get it there. Oh, wow. So technically, unless it's, because that Saturn's at 29:58. It's going to be May 24th. here. That's so weird. That's actually this is where I think it teaches people good astrology. The time is at 9:48 p.m. even though it didn't do that. I did it for 11:30 p.m. and it still wasn't in there. 10:54. Oh, maybe that's because I had it set for Irvine. So there is the missing 7 hours. So it technically is for us the 24th, which is exactly what's going to happen again. Even though it's not the same calendar, it's just kind of like a...
Yeah, it's just a new
it's just,
numbers
it is a weird kind of... Like if I were to put... Well, so that's going to put this... We'll do it for noon just so people could see. All right. There we go. All right. We'll save it that way. So what we have here is... Oh, I can't see it. I have to get rid of these stupid things. Quit. There we go. Okay. Yeah, that's the screen. So Saturn in Aries at 0 degrees and 0 minutes. We're about to come into that May 24th. Mm-hmm. Neptune in Aries, which we just saw. But this was Neptune pretty much into Aries. But ironically enough, Pluto in Aquarius. I mean, so we're hitting a lot of the same bells. But we're hitting the big bell here, which is, I know it's Jupiter at the end of Cancer, but we are about to enter into Jupiter in Cancer in the next month with Neptune, Saturn in Aries, and Pluto in Aquarius. Right? So to get to this, it's taken 974 years or 76 years, whatever it is, 76, yeah, something like that. And the event to me is like more aligned with Pluto in the Aquarius aspect and Neptune in Aries, this supernova event that lasts for 23 days, but it actually is in the daytime able to be seen. So it's strong enough of a supernova that you could see it while the sun's up. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, it happens to be what they call in history the Great Schism, because of what happened in the Holy Roman Empire and the ideas of the church as we now know the Catholic Church today and the Eastern Orthodox Greek Church that has now moved more east, and then in the next part of I guess you would say in the 11th century into the 12th century, and then moving into like the 15th century, it moves into like the Russian church and ends up to where the Orthodox Church names Moscow as like the third church in that Orthodox tradition, that it's not just about Jerusalem or it's not just about, right? It's pretty wild though. It's like you hear about Eastern Orthodox Christianity and then you hear about Catholicism, and then of course we deal with Protestant. I think what's happened in the history is people kind of don't think about that schism. It's not talked about a lot. From my understanding.
Yeah. I mean, it's always, isn't it a moment always in your history textbooks? It is. I mean, I know that because I use history textbooks a lot, but there's always the discussion of the Great Schism. And probably everybody remembers at some point preparing for an exam where you had to give the date for when was the Great Schism, but who thinks about what that even means anymore, right? But I think that it's, I mean, maybe we should go over the timeline, because you have a timeline. I also have just this, we could do the Wikipedia overview, and people can see the map of where the East and West are if you want to put my screen up and then do your timeline. So it is.
Yes, Dr. Ann.
Please put up, what is it that Jimmy Church has his assistant putting his maps
up?
Oh,
yeah.
Please put my map up, sir.
I know, with a UAP hat on.
Yes. Anyway, here's the the map of the Great
Wikipedia
Schism.
version of
Yeah,
it.
it's
Yeah.
just looking at what is this. At one time, there was this idea of Christendom, that
Right.
that you have this one church, but there were differing views about how should we administer the church in different parts of the, what do you call it, kingdom of Christ or whatever it would be.
It's the
Christendom.
Christendom.
Yeah,
And it's weird because the whole Christ is King has been popping up
Yeah.
in this last month with Easter. And that is the idea that comes from the Christendom and the King, and then the battle of the way that the West started to add Jesus to have the Holy Spirit be connected to Jesus when it was only the Father, not the Son. They started adding it to Christ and making Christ more king-like. And the Eastern Orthodox Church goes, we don't like that.
Yeah, there are different beliefs. I mean, this is where, when you did your post on Easter about how the Council of Nicaea
Right.
determined what are going to be the official, even basic beliefs, the core doctrine
Right.
of this religion, and they create the Bible, and everybody gets on their beliefs, and it's supposed to be uniform. Even then, there were dissenting beliefs about what books should
Yeah,
be in
and
the Bible.
Like Arian
And all
was
of that, right?
the
And
Arian-
Arianism was a big deal,
and-
and that comes back up in 1054 again. Or they want to squelch
because
that.
because it's all coming back to Germania and Germans, and that's what's even weirder.
Well, yeah, there's that whole element.
And
That,
the Franks and all that stuff. It's really that Eastern Prussian, German kind of like, we go our direction. We're loud. We're not going to go with it.
right? The Eastern,
Yeah, the Eastern
well,
Bloc.
yeah.
That's a communist term, but But it's interesting though, because the world
is
splits
how it
this.
divides that
Yeah.
way. I don't know what it is, but we really need to investigate why does the dividing line in Europe. I mean, look at this map. It's not
Yeah.
exactly the Soviet bloc versus the Western
Right.
world, but it's always in that area. Poland is always moving back and forth at different eras of history or being taken over by different
I
people.
know.
But I mean, at this time, there was the Byzantine Empire on the east, and then the Holy Roman Empire
Yep.
in the former areas of what was once the Roman Empire and the Macedonian Empire before that.
Yep.
And, this is basically an empire that has fallen apart.
Yeah.
And at one point, Christianity was connected to the empire to try to keep it together or to have this centralized belief system, or because Constantine converted and he was inspired and that's what happened.
Right.
Right. And and since then, sorry.
Yeah, because that after Constantine and after the Council of Nicaea, you start getting into the fall of Rome, right? And you start getting into the Justinian. Everybody goes to Constantinople, and then the Justinian plagues and Emperor Justinian, and how that all happened.
One of the interesting things about Justinian is he's emperor in the Byzantine Empire in 555. That was something I was noticing.
That date had come up. That's right, because we covered that years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's weird that day came up to. I think it was that Pluto, Aquarius, and I think maybe we were looking for like Neptune, Aries for the future.
Well, what's interesting is
That's
that
weird.
We've been looking at. We started with what happened with Pluto when Pluto moved from Capricorn to Aquarius.
Right.
That's one of the first things we were looking at. Then it was like, well, what if we add Neptune? What happened with Neptune?
Right.
And I mean, I guess we even just separately looked at Neptune and Aries. We've done all sorts of shows.
We've cut it up in every way we can, Ann, and that's what I love about this show.
But what's so funny is it keeps coming back to some of these issues, and I feel like people are thinking they're talking about that again, but
it's not our choice. That's where the astrology leads.
I know. And this time, guess what? For those who keep asking about China, China plays a role.
Huge role in this one. And that's what makes even this moment, doing the history in the stars in this moment, we have the conclave happening for a new pope. You have the West and China at its most tense moment, I would say, in a long history time. I don't even know if I could go back to know that moment where there's actual like military aspects to it. There's trade aspects to it. There's negotiations, of course, that are going to happen this weekend. And it's all surrounded at the same time while we're in a world right now that's got so many different changes. Like Canada just got a new prime minister. It's just a really interesting moment. We also are seeing the rise of Christianity again after its kind of fall. And that's where it kind of does bring up kind of, well, this is interesting because even the Civil War in America, there was a different version of Christianity in the way that people looked at slaves. But there was no definition of that. It was more like you're a Southerner, you're part of the Confederacy, and we don't look at it that way. So there never was written like a Christian kind of like, well, you're a slavery Christian or you're a abolitionist Christian. I guess that would be the only kind of things. But
right.
This is a bigger schism though, because it's like the schism that actually draws the line that still to this day have been drawn and have not.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Also, I just watched J.D. Vance speaking in Munich again. Was that recent? I think that was something that just came out.
I mean, it was like in the last couple months. I think it was near the kind of beginning of the term when he went to Europe and tried to tell them about the UN and all that stuff.
He was talking about, he did address what he had said before. Right?
Oh, so maybe he just went there after being in India.
I believe he just did.
So he went and saw the Pope. The Pope died hours later. He went to India, and now India and Pakistan are in a major war. And just 20 minutes before we went live, India just said if Pakistan attacks back, they're going to use a nuke.
Yeah.
I'm like, wow, J.D. Vance is on fire right now, wherever he goes.
It's that
I hope you invite him to your Mother's Day for your mom. That's the ultimate gift. Good joke.
I know. What do you mean?
Well, because like he was with the Pope just died, and then and he goes to India. Now India's in a huge war with Pakistan, threatening nuclear warheads and to use them. I'm like, oh, so your Mother's Day this weekend? Make sure you invite J.D. Vance to your Mother's Day for your mom.
Oh no,
That's a good joke.
Horrible. You're starting to tell dad jokes now. No?
I know, I am.
But anyway, what was I going to say? Oh, in that talk, he mentioned Iran with its, wanting to try to stop nuclear proliferation. And again, that's another aspect of this East-West divide is when you think about, all those things that are happening too. And it's just to me really interesting though, that at this time, it was that first big split that was almost, what is even the word, like made these two churches, because I think before the Great Schism, was anyone sitting around and thinking, we are all part of Christendom? I wonder if they had such a
I have that
uniform idea.
It really does have problems going back 5 centuries prior in the 550s, ironically enough. But it's really when Charlemagne becomes the Holy Roman Emperor and the head of the church.
That steps things up.
That's what really gets the idea of where the Orthodox Church in the East starts to go. This is imperialism, and it actually gets to where after the schism, during the Holy Wars, the Catholic Church, they have the West, they have the countries that they send over to become Templar Knights and all these things. They decimate Orthodox Christian churches and take over their it's kind of nasty. It's truly the civil war of Christianity.
Right.
And it still lives on today.
And again, it has these different ideas of rulership too, because in the Roman Church, it's this idea that the Pope is the infallible one. Those cardinals are meeting right now and they're getting the message from God, and that smoke's going to turn white with no assistance.
I know. I watched the movie Conclave, and they did. There's not enough paper ballots to make that much smoke, so they enhance the smoke with it's like a fog.
Did they do that in the movie?
Yeah, in the movie they show
the
at the Vatican what they use, and they turn it and push the button. It's older, but they've enhanced and added, so it's a little bit of a show, a Disneyland thing.
We like good shows, though. People follow.
But the nuns do sit out and wait, and they look up, and they're all holding the birds, waiting. Nope, no birds. Put them back in the cage. Really interesting.
The birds are probably happier with the nuns.
I would agree. I actually think, you know what? If I was born a bird, that wouldn't be a bad life. I'm hanging out with nuns, and they're taking care of me and probably feeding me good. And
anyway, so how do we get onto the birds with the nuns?
Just that right now, like if you're looking at that period in time and how it's kind of transpired today, it's like.
So the rulership, though, was in the West, it's more about the Pope himself. In the East, it was more about the council, right?
Yes.
That the council, it's more of a body of people that are involved in running the church. And it's
Very
just a
much
different
so.
idea. There's this different notion of who should have authority. And it's interesting to me that Islam has a similar split after the death of Muhammad. That there's we talked about this in another show,
the Sunnis and the Shiites, yeah.
Right? So that doesn't happen around the same time, though, right?
No, that's 600s, right? So.
So anyway, but at this time, when the church is falling apart over these doctrinal
that's pretty
issues,
close to 555, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Pretty close.
But at 1054, when everything's falling apart over these theological arguments that they have about, is Jesus the Son of God, or does he have divinity or not? I pulled up the Nicene Creed just so I can remember.
Oh yeah, because
let's look.
Because it was about the Trinity, right? Like in the Nicene Creed, it's about defining the Trinity, and that, okay, we're acknowledging that Christ, if he is the Son of God, then he would have the same godly energy or powers as God.
So if people don't know about what is the Nicene Creed, it's something that you'll hear to this day if you go to a church service in most places. Even in Protestant churches, they probably say it at less times of the year, but it is supposed to be the codified, approved beliefs of the church. And so in the First Council of Nicaea established that creed. So this is what people were supposed to believe at that point, and it was in one Lord Jesus Christ, the Son of God, begotten of the Father, light of light, very God of a very God, begotten, not made, consubstantial with the Father. All right, and then we get down here.
Oh, if you go up, down a little bit, right there, and in the Holy Ghost, because it's the Holy Ghost that is the schism.
So this was separate. At this point, it was just all of a sudden
that God.
Here's the Jesus story. Then they believe in the Holy Ghost. So then that changes. Let's get down to the change. I really hope it shows the changed creed. I didn't check. All right, we'll have to.
Well, I mean, I have all the data on what the schism was about, but you
can look at that.
It goes everything into also like, because you're correct about how there's like this centralized power of the Pope with the Western Church, because that starts with Charlemagne. So that starts to get a lot of people ticked off on the other side. But it also gets to this idea of whether it's bishops or priests, that when it comes to who can baptize somebody in the West, it was only a bishop can. But in the East, they felt that the priests are on the ground with people. So that's something that Protestants take in Protestant, right? If you think about it, or the Church of England, they take those from the Eastern Orthodox understandings, not the Catholic Church, right? Because the Catholic Church eventually does get to that place. But it's kind of interesting, though, that it begins, though, with that idea, or it comes into who is supposed to be celibate. And so the Eastern Church believed that priests didn't have to be celibate, and that only different higher ranking officials maybe did. But it was across the board on the Western Church. So it actually had a lot to do with celibacy too.
Yeah.
But the core was about the Holy Ghost.
That's this thing. It was here. Where is it? So it's all this stuff about Jesus came down for men and for our salvation. He came down from heaven and by the Holy Spirit. So where is that? It was incarnate of the Virgin Mary and became man. So he came down. I don't even know all the theological differences, but there's the differences they're arguing about. And I have my comparison document too that talks all about the differing ideas, and I actually compared it to today's church to see what sorts of similar issues are we dealing with today. Because that's what's interesting in this particular conclave. One of the issues, and especially after the movie, there are people who keep talking about, maybe this time we'll have a really different person,
Oh, right.
and it'll be a woman really, or whatever.
So the main theological disputes and the doctrinal divergencies was in the Nicene Creed, professed belief in the Holy Spirit who proceeds from the Father. In the early Middle Ages, churches in Western Europe began adding "and from the Son" to the creed.
Right.
So that the Spirit was said to proceed from the Father and the Son. This addition meant to bolster the Trinitarian theology against heresy, was done without consulting the Eastern Church. So it does kind of, I can imagine that though. It's kind of like, you guys are making all these changes without including us. So it does become like, well, they're so far, they're going to take too long. We want to do this now.
Right. But they're also doing that. They're saying, you're making these changes without telling us. And they've set up the Holy Roman Emperor with Charlemagne.
Which they looked at that as imperialism, which I would say is true.
Yeah, they're saying, okay, look at, you guys are
right
making these executive decisions and backing it up with the secular rulers who will come to your defense.
And so the Eastern theologians objected on both procedural and theological grounds. Altering the creed without the council was seen as illegitimate, and many in the East believed that the doctrine itself was theologically erroneous, preferring to say that Spirit proceeds eternally from the Father alone. And by 1054, that had become a flashpoint and the symbol of how the West would innovate its theology and impose its views. And so the other one was the papal primacy. In the early church, Rome enjoyed a primacy of honor, but the extent of the Pope's authority was contested. The popes had come to claim a universal jurisdiction as the successors of St. Peter, holding supreme authority over the whole Christian church. This claim was never accepted in the East. Eastern was conciliar, and the idea that the five patriarchs, Rome, Constantinople, Alexandria, Antioch, and Jerusalem, shared authority. So they looked at it more republic-like, kind of like, if I were to put it, instead of this centralized one power source. And I think that's an interesting moment that we're seeing now in the world. It's also an interesting moment that you do see with that same power accused to the Catholic Church in 1533 and 34 during the same astrological outer planets of Pluto and Aquarius, Neptune and Aries, both switching from signs, and that Henry had for his schism from the church of that centralized power. And you have Martin Luther that was saying a lot of the same things about the power of that church and the supremacy of the Pope, acting as if he's the ruler of the lands and the countries that he's not of. So it is interesting that actually the Eastern Church is like the Martin Luthers, and they don't have to do a thesis. They do get into some extreme battles, and they both consider that each other are, doing blasphemy on each side.
Do you have that timeline? Because it shows how they...
It's really fast.
They,
so yeah, I do.
Excommunicated each other.
It's all within 1 year, 1053 into 1054, and it's done. But of course, that goes backwards farther, but finally, and it deals with the Pope, and he's dealing with, so the Latin use of the unleavened bread in the Eastern versus the Byzantinian used of leavened bread. This might seem a minor ritual difference, but in 1053, this patriarch named Ceralius, though his ally Leo of Ohrid attacked the Western use as improper, even Jewish. So it also comes back to where the Nicene Council in 325 wanted to change and create Easter to not be on Passover and to get off of the Jewish church, Jewish calendar. It's even more interesting that it even comes back to the way that the bread is being used, that it feels that the rituals that are being used are being too much like being too Jewish. That was how it was actually looked at. And it became and it angered the Latins that it became an immediate trigger for the schism. Western defenders retorted that Christ used unleavened bread at the Last Supper as it was Passover, while Eastern Christians held that leavened bread better symbolized the risen Christ. I mean, how crazy is this? Like, if you really think about, we just had Easter and this whole Easter thing, and nobody can get to an agreement on Easter.
Well, the thing that's so funny to me is that I've been freaking out about the fact that people just won't agree about almost anything these days.
I know.
But imagine if you're sitting there just trying to go to church and you can't even get communion because everybody's arguing about what type of bread, or just wanting to go to war because one person's using a wafer and the other person's using a loaf of bread.
Well, I think because then there's also the celibacy part.
Yeah, but
so there is
the
that
Roman
kind
Church
of
figured that out. You
right.
say you're celibate, and then you have to have Martin Luther come along and say,
right.
Nobody's paying attention to this, or a lot of people have concubines, or whatever they call them.
Or all the monasteries just hide all the pregnant nuns. But well, that's what they found when we looked when Henry VIII.
Conveniently, he found all those things, so he had to seize all that land.
I mean, I don't think it was convenient. The documentation's pretty well done.
But how many people had he killed by then? So if you were writing the document, are you going to write, nothing's happening here, the nuns just have pigeons?
Well, you showed me all the numbers, right? And it wasn't like they went blasphemy with it, as if both sides here were accusing. Like, it was like, okay, that kind of made sense. It was like, out of all these monasteries, we found, there were three that had children out of wedlock, right? 3 priests that had done that. We had a bishop who did, it wasn't like the radical out of control.
Right.
But it was enough to go, that's what's happening here, and the money, and all, right? So right. To me, it's kind of like you add then the Western Church that was going under a reforming post, but increasingly mandating celibacy for all the priests, where the Eastern discipline allowed parish priests to marry. Only bishops had to be celibate. So, and then that's where it also comes into the idea of the practices and the baptisms, whereas like it's more what then the Catholic Church does take on, the idea that a priest can baptize somebody. I think that's okay now. I mean, I don't, I think it is, but it's like back then, no, it was only bishops. So they're fighting over, gosh, that's such a 1,000-year squabble, right? Like 1,000 years after Christ has died, and then 700 years after the Council of Nicaea, we need to change all this. And it's interesting that it becomes about those big parts, but there was also political rivalry. So that goes into the Byzantine Empire, the Frankish power, and so it goes back to that coronation of Charlemagne in 800 as the new emperor of the West, and he was viewed with deep suspicion in Constantinople, because it's like, in my Age of Deception I did back in 2016, I showed that this is going to be, I showed the image, it's a beautiful painting, I should probably look it up, but it's just when Constantine takes the crown, and it's just all these like bishops in the background behind him. And that's why in America we say this is not a place of church and state. It can mix. They have to be separate. Mm-hmm. Whereas every other place, especially, looking at Great Britain.
And isn't it interesting?
I mean, like
some news today too.
Well, the Prince Edward news today. I mean, wow. Yeah.
Andrew.
Or Andrew.
Edward's
I mean, what's even weirder though is then you have the Catholic cardinals where part of their power issue right now in choosing the next pope is about issues of people in the church abusing sexual power. The same thing. Well, we don't know yet because the news just came out to officially from the literal horse's mouth who tried to be the one that said Prince Andrew was not doing that, actually saying he did and how upset he was. And, the news report about it with the interview with him on how he tried to say the medical reason from shock and military that he couldn't sweat. I mean, it was like the lamest excuse of all time. But it's weird that all that's coming back up because it is that energy of like watching too much power and then you being on the outside and then you're not getting any of your word in, but we're supposed to be all together in this. And then there was jurisdictional disputes, like basically that Greek-speaking Christians under Byzantine rule had followed Eastern rites for centuries, but as those religions fell under Western, like the Norman control, the Roman Church tried to assert Latin practices there. So it becomes this like, well, what area? And then trying to spread it as everybody needs to say Latin, right? So it also is this idea of like the old kind of Greek way of doing it. And that was what's really interesting about Rome itself is the idea of Greek republics and watching Rome turn into emperors and become this very extreme imperialistic, expansion, world's greatest, at that time, empire. And it becomes like a Roman and Greek, Latin Greek kind of, there's a lot of similarities, but they're different. And that never leaves. Because there's that battle of, look what the Romans did. They took something great and ruined it. Plus they went and when they got control, they went over to Greece and did battle all the Greeks and kill a bunch of Greeks in order to make Rome expand. I think some people forget about that, but then as an astrologer, it's really interesting, right? Because it's used on both sides and there's no battles. So what's really interesting to me is like, sure, in astrology, we have our little quiver, our little battles over how to do astrology. It's nothing like this kind of stuff. We still will get together and break astrology charts together instead of bread.
Well, yeah.
And even with a Vedic astrologer or a Chinese astrologer or whatever, we'll still come together throughout all the centuries and still to keep doing it together. That's the one irony of astrology and the religions against it. And then there was like a papal reform movement, which reminds me a lot of, I don't know how there was kind of like this movement in America in the 1820s of getting rid of Masons as presidents and in government. But there was also the papal reform, and that was during the era of the Gregorian reform with Gregory VII, who came later, and then Pope Leo IX, who was the Pope during this
he was
great
at the
schism.
Beginning of it, though, right?
The beginning, and then
Victor.
Victor, because he dies. Which
That's
is so
the other
weird,
interesting
is
thing.
there was a moment, they're in this squabble, the Pope dies, and it's not some conclave, it's the battle happening, and there's no Pope. And that's how it's able to happen.
Or it is the new Pope, because I was just looking. Pope Victor II, born Gebhard von Dulstein-Hirschberg, was the head of the Catholic Church.
Oh, look! Can we look at his image? Let's see
April
that.
13th,
Let's see that
1055.
beautiful painting from back then.
There he is. So he was in April, and
That's when popes were thin.
maybe young. I don't know, but he died
Before the
soon
kids.
after. Oh my gosh, David.
That's what
stole
BC
jokes
means.
today.
That's what BC means before BK. Before the children, BC.
PC. Oh my God.
Before the children. BC before the children. Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, okay, here's what I want to think about an astrological question. So Victor II becomes Pope in April, but then this thing happens in May, and the Great Schism happens in July, right?
Yes.
So you would say, like, as this is building, is why all these tensions are coming up? Or would it have been tensions were flaring up the whole time Pluto had been in Aquarius, or Neptune had been in Aries? What do you think about all this?
Okay, that is the best question I've ever got with astrology in a long time.
Well, I'm so happy that it was me who asked.
As an astrologer, I'm always like softball. This one's like what gets me going as an astrologer.
Okay.
So just because a planet is in a sign, right? And you might see it near the end, like Jupiter in this case, or Neptune. What's sparking this in May is Saturn at the end of Pisces moving and ingressing over the 0 point into Aries. So this is literally moving into Aries with Saturn. And this is why Nostradamus' secret is about the Saturn cycles as it moves into Aries. Because at Pisces, it's where all the corruption or any of the subconscious stuff is building up. And in Aries, it becomes in its fall position because something's going to fall. Secrets are going to be revealed. People's real subconscious energies are going to come out in Aries. It's going to be defined. And so if you think about with Saturn on its approach to Neptune, right, it also is that understanding you have to go back 30 plus years with Saturn-Neptune transits, right? Like that Saturn-Neptune transit that was prior to that, everything's building up, especially it's always going to be about religion. Neptune or some sort of spirituality or some sort of theological spiritual view, and the rules need to be dissolved, and the rules also need to be looked at if cleansed in a kind of way. So that's why you'll see like reform, right? This idea of reform is very Saturn Neptune. But also in this case, it's Jupiter square Neptune. That's what we're coming into. And that means like what we went through in 2022. So our Jupiter Neptune was in Pisces. Theirs was in Aries. But they had it with Pluto and Aquarius, which is kind of interesting. We had it with Pluto and Capricorn, but it was 2022. And then 2023, Pluto ingressed into Aquarius, and Jupiter, Neptune finally split apart. And we started to see Jupiter in Aries and Neptune in Pisces. And then we're in the square, which is going to be hitting for us in the next month too, with Saturn and Aries ingress. So it's more about like, how are you at not just positionally, but what's happening here is the same that's happening then. Saturn coming into Aries and Jupiter squaring Neptune. And that means it's the first quarter square, like if you were to use a lunar, like a moon lunar phase, right? Like the first square is always going to bring up the issues from the conjunction. So in this case, it's going to be always like 3 to 4 years for that Jupiter after it conjuncts Neptune to make it square. But it's also in cardinal signs like we're in. And so Saturn at the beginning of an Aries point is always going to be about, okay, we need to redefine this next whole new, let's call it chapter, instead of a page. It's a chapter. So the world right now feels like, where's the next chapter going? That's because it ain't written. And a lot of the things that are getting pulled out right now. And everything's going to feel very new. And so anything that is being brought up, one thing that Nostradamus really did a good job with in how he teaches you by knowing how to crack the code is that if you follow every Saturn ingress into Aries and you go back and you go forward from 1555 AD, it literally is the 2.5 years prior before that you see the plagues, you see the deceptions, you see conspiracies, you see flooding, you see, right? Like you see all of his predictions are really easy to also look at the Saturn and Pisces transit. But when Saturn and Neptune in Pisces into Aries, oh boy, that's where Saturn's going to be bringing up the things about the church and all those kind of things. If you think about the 1553 conjunction or transit of Neptune ingressing into Aries, Pluto, and Aquarius, and that schism from the church, Saturn wasn't with those. So it's interesting that it's like a schism between these countries, and the religions, it's very similar, but it also is like there is a leader. What's interesting about this is about the whole core of the Christianity itself. And so with Jupiter in Cancer and that square to Neptune in Aries, those are the two planets that rule Pisces. So if you really look at it, you go into Pisces, Saturn was there as the buildup of the square. And what's happening now? Jupiter's been starting to square Neptune, the ruler, both rule Pisces, and where's Saturn? Pisces. Where was the Venus retrograde? Pisces. Back into that, right? So all the stuff that comes up is going to start to come up by that May. And then just because it happens doesn't mean it's over, especially in mundane astrology. If anything, it's the fact that, okay, the Jupiter-Neptune square is going to happen. Jupiter's going to go into Leo. So that's not going to happen for us this year. But it's that Saturn that's like, oh, I'm staying here in Aries, and there's Neptune. And then the other part too is like, okay, it's going to start to bridge all of those issues. The problem with Saturn in Aries, why it's at fall, is it can't control the issue right away. Saturn in Capricorn, 6 feet apart right now, wear a mask. With Pluto there, people fall in line like sheep. Saturn in Aries, though, the issue cannot be dealt with the way that you want to, because there's too many rams running around. There's too much anger around. There's too much fight. So that's why Neptune does poorly in Aries too. Now you're adding Saturn. And so that's where it's interesting to see that Saturn, Neptune in Aries with the Pluto in Aquarius. That's what we're in.
Yeah.
Starting in 2 weeks. And then Jupiter's coming into Cancer during Gemini season. And it was Gemini season with Jupiter in Cancer, Neptune Aries, and Saturn making its ingress into here. And so like the closest you can get, and with Pluto Aquarius, to that is 1054 with where we're at right now. That this is actually more relevant than 1534. Is that scary or not to you?
I think equally bad. I don't know if it's scary, because what I'm sitting here thinking about is, okay, the difference in the outer planets is Uranus and Scorpio, right? So, which is we have Uranus at the end of side, Taurus. Right. I didn't even think about the fact that it's opposed.
Right.
Okay, so here's what I am thinking about. This great schism happened at the top levels of the church. And even looking, because there's this other event that's connected to this period of time that we're not talking about yet. And I was looking for evidence of, well, aren't there any records and any chronicles or anything of this other event in Europe that we'll talk about in a minute? Mm-hmm. And there's not a lot, because the West at that time wasn't as organized in terms of its schools, right, and the people and the books, and they didn't have all the monks copying everything. And because
the monasteries weren't built yet.
Even then you'd have monks or some other kind of more common people. This is at the top levels, and we can only assume ordinary people were carrying on with their lives, and maybe they weren't even that aware of what was happening at the top levels of society. Or because in England around this time, they have Edward the Confessor, and soon after that they're going to be invaded, and there's going to be the Norman Conquest. So something's happening around that time in England. There's a succession crisis, and they do go to war, but you don't hear a lot about how it impacts ordinary people. So to me, the difference is that we're having this innovative shaking, like the Uranian aspect of it for us maybe is more of the people, I don't know, in Taurus versus Scorpio. But for us, it's not so much just the top levels of society. And so I feel like it's more this fractured idea of religious belief and people have many beliefs now, many different doctrines that they live by that aren't just religion. But it's interesting, at the same time, you do see the church. You do see these things happening in the church. And to me, the weirdest part is...
That's what's happening as you and I are speaking right now in the conclave with those cardinals.
Yeah. Or they're sleep. Do they sleep or they stay awake?
They all sleep in the same area. They all have like their own little apartment room because they come from all parts of the world. And then what they do is they just go, okay, and then they get all put in like nice little cars, and then they get sent to the Sixtine Chapel, and then they make their votes, and then they come back. But they all get to like kind of congregate in their own little ways, right?
But
they're allowed to do
late,
that, right? And they all go into each other's rooms and have little private convos and say, you should drop out, or because it's really about, it's very political. Like there's liberal, and then there's conservative, and then there's kind of in the middle of the road. And it really becomes also very political of like, well, what did they offer you if you get your 20 cardinals that you're friends with that follow you because they like your ideas? Well, yeah, he's going to make me Secretary of State if he becomes Pope. I mean, it's just like a presidency, or it's just like it's like squabbling on the royal court.
Yeah, lobbying for position, being strategic.
Yeah, so that's where it's very similar as the squabbles, the way that people are positioning. And I think what's really weird, to go back to what you said about the astrology, is it's April that Pope Leo IX died, and he was being held as a prisoner by the Normans. And so that's where I think it's kind of like how these moments happen are interesting, because it's now the voice of the suppressed energy in that May that comes out when Saturn's at the end of Pisces, and there's Neptune in Aries, and there's Pluto in Aquarius, right? And it's like, it reminds me more of like the French Revolution, how it took a little bit of time. The same way that like America's Revolution took a little bit of time, but like the French Revolution's more of one that began in the Pluto Aquarius transit, where it is messier. It's a little bit sloppier. It's not so planned out.
Well, yeah, and there is this whole, people have their grievances. They have the Estates General. There's the whole process of, we're trying to remedy these issues. The king stays alive for the longest time before he finally is taken at the guillotine. So it's a much longer, but more violent.
The oligarchs, the aristocrats, right? Are just getting guillotined in the streets, while the king's just kind of like, well, I hope this goes away. Let's take everybody's guns, which is an idea that actually came in the French Revolution. Which is kind of scary, actually.
Yeah, I didn't think about that, but every time we do this,
or
I
their
say we have
swords
to do
too.
a show on
they
the French
actually
Revolution.
Took the military. The king told, like, all your guns and all your swords. They would take it from men. And they were just littered with huge areas full of people's swords and guns.
So there you would have this idea of the king trying to assert his traditional authority while and calling in the nobles and whatever, trying to organize them. They're not listening. No. And at the same time, a whole new group of people has found a voice. So that's the element of, in this great schism, that whole new group of people is, it sounds like, it's not a whole new group, but it's more like the structure's falling apart, and you've got these people in the East who don't have their Charlemagne type of person, their Holy Roman Emperor.
Well, they have their Emperor Constantine the Ninth that's in writings in 1503, September, or 1053, sorry, it's a weird time to go back in and start just 1053. But that's what's interesting, is there was letters written from the Pope and the Emperor and the Eastern Church trying to find common ground in order to fight together and to stay together, because the Normans are out there. Mm-hmm. But then the Pope dies, was prisoner, and then the envoys come in and negotiations fail almost immediately, because the Archbishop is the one that's in there, and the letters and the negotiations failed, and Hubert and that Solarius exchanged harsh treatises, and they compared a polemical tract against the Greeks, accusing the Eastern Church of errors. So it starts being where they start throwing crap at each other, and a month of stalemate ensued while the emperor desperately tried to keep peace. So that's what's kind of interesting is like, there is this kind of like ceasefire of words to try and find peace, but it's by July 16th that the papal legates marched into the Hagia Sophia during the divine liturgy and dramatically placed a bull of excommunication on the altar denouncing Solarius. So it was the Western Church that said, you and your followers, just how they did with Arian back in 325 AD and excommunicated him from the Council of Nicaea and the treaty then, and all those going about that. And you and your people are out of here. They did the same thing.
But then they came back and excommunicated
Correct.
the Roman Pope, right?
Correct. On July 20th, then Solarius convened a synod on July 20th, and the synod condemned the legates who had already departed the city and issued a decree of excommunication about them in turn. And notably, Ceruleus did not explicitly excommunicate the entire Western Church or the Pope, who was anyways deceased. So that's what's weird. There was no Pope.
Well, that's what I was thinking too. When we were looking at this, I thought, I wonder how many, if we went back in time to look at those periods of time when the Pope is dead and the new one hasn't been elected, which we did briefly mention in that episode about the Pope. But
right.
If we went back in time and looked at that, how many times is there some strange political maneuvering or power grab or something that happens in that period of time?
I know I will say you brought up the example of like James O'Keefe's expose today of Prince Andrew.
Right.
Like there is no Pope to protect him right now, even though it's ironic because it should be an archbishop within the Church of England.
They have their own problems, or one has.
But they don't want anything attached to that.
But the thing is to think about with that is even the Church of England. So he's in line for the throne, right? He's second now he's been pushed way down.
He's been pushed down.
Right, but at the time when he was carrying on, he was closer in line to the throne, and he is a person who should be within the official Church of England that broke away during one of these transit times that we're looking at, right? If you look at 1534, and when all that was happening, it's like another stage on the way to where we are now today. So the fact that there's a member of the royal family who's being challenged publicly in any way is, again, kind of chipping away at the authority, because it also looks bad on the authority of the monarchy in general.
Yeah, it does.
That they let that continue, and most likely probably
it makes Queen Elizabeth II look very bad. Like she did everything to protect her son. Right.
It's the authority of this privileged status that whereby people think they're exempt from.
And then it gives Prince Harry and Meghan Markle another point. Does that make sense? Like that's what's even interesting is you have Prince Andrew, who's been not excommunicated, but not allowed to carry his monarch's traditional duties, right? Then you have that with Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, who then have like accusations within the monarch, right? So it's Prince Andrew's trying to grip to the monarch to save him, but no, we don't want you to burn this. And now you have all the stories about, is the kid going to come looking not white enough, right? That was the main thing with Meghan Markle when she came out on Oprah, and how Prince Harry and her tried to do all this around the world. And right now they look better, right? That maybe that is true. If you're backing up the son of the queen who is out having sex with children on Epstein's Island.
And
right?
even at the same time, now there's also this person claiming he was basically the parent of the two royal princesses.
Yeah. And that he was raising their kids, and that Prince Andrew was his friend and knew about it the whole time. And then they acted in the Daily Mail as if he hired this crisis guy who actually is the guy who's been his friend, who's been watching his own children for years and sleeping with his wife. That's that's the part that most people are not catching up in the expose that just happened on with James O'Keefe and O'Keefe Media and what looks like Project Veritas coming back together with James. It's wild.
Yeah, and it almost makes me think about like if we talk about the supernova, that's like the missing huge thing right here, because it's almost as if there is something huge in the sky, and it doesn't even have to be a supernova. There is something huge that people are just going to ignore, right? Like right now, if we carry on and we don't address this huge issue, it's like in the Middle Ages, there's no record in the West about the fact that there was this supernova in 1054 that appeared July 4th of 1054, which I thought was interesting, although it wouldn't be the same day. Right. But this supernova appeared, and it's brighter than Venus in the daytime, and it could be seen for a month, right?
Yes.
It was supernova 1054.
Yes. And it is, honestly, I think, as an astrologer, what a lot of the historical and the researchers have looked at is like, this is astrology because the way it's recorded is about what it means. There's actually the meaning behind it written in the Chinese and the Japanese and so forth. There's a meaning behind it that's written down.
About this supernova.
Correct.
Yeah.
Meaning that like it's going into astrology because they put meaning to celestial events. We live in a world right now where people are putting meaning on their own. They're not realizing it, to a UAP sighting, to what's happening with the solar flares. I feel the solar flares and the government and everybody acting like, well, I mean, there is a site that NIH has looked at it, but it's not like it's not on the official stuff. They don't talk about it. Mm-hmm. They might say, oh, it might disrupt your power a little bit or your cell phone or whatever, right? But they don't actually tell you what's really. So there's all these celestial events happening, and people are actually putting meaning to them on their own, the same way they did 1,000 years ago and prior.
Exactly. Yeah. That's interesting.
So that's where the astrology is bringing back that too. Mm-hmm. That people are doing it on their own.
So people must have been doing something on their own at this time. So your church, the schism happens in July.
Right? July 16th. And it's 23 days during the daytime that the supernova is white and red, as bright as the sun, because the sun is so bright. So you could see it in the middle of the day for 23 days. And then it was for 2 months at night, you could still see it. Mm-hmm. That's a long time. And for the West to not record it, it makes sense because there is well, we can finish with the supernova first and then go into the why would the West not see this or record it? Well, obviously, there's a great schism happening, and so the Catholic Church doesn't want any of its people to look up or to think that there is a divine providence moment happening here, that maybe the Eastern Church is correct, or maybe the Western Church is correct. The Eastern guys don't want anybody to attach it to anything. So that's what's really weird, is also in that paper, it says that, let's say there's a monk who wants to talk about it. Well, I know the church is in a really weird moment right now. There's no pope. They're fighting. I don't want to say anything and be looked at superstitious.
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking about, so I looked up, was the Western Church using astrology at this time? And it said they really weren't using it officially, they weren't using it like they would in the 1200s.
Right.
At this time, it's because it's kind of traditionally at the end of that time that we think of as the Dark Ages. So there's
Correct,
not as
where
much.
actually it was the Middle East that was holding astrology together at that period.
Yeah, and the Byzantine Empire,
Yeah.
the Eastern part of the church would have used astrology. They did. So I didn't look at what they might have said.
Well,
But in
and the spiritual universities are in the Middle East at this time, carrying it and adding all of the Arabic parts to astrology, right? And actually not having squabbles, but having amazing things that we use in astrology today.
But it's just so fascinating that if you are, a noble, I guess, or a commoner, if you're hearing there's some crazy stuff happening in the church, people are arguing over what kind of bread we use, whatever, then you look up in the sky and you see this thing. I just have to put myself in the mindset of what are these people thinking?
I know.
Because there's not any kind of media telling you what to think about it.
Yeah, but that's exactly what we're seeing now. There's UFOs happening. There's people have videos of them. There's the whole Miami alien thing with more cops than you've ever seen at the mall, and they try and say it was just a couple, high school kids having a scruffle. When there's 150 police cars out front, and there's people saying they saw aliens walking through that place, right? And nobody's saying anything, right? So that's where I think it's going to get interesting, that this astrology definitely is the closest, because there's not just the phase and how the transits are happening, but also just the fact that these are the exact same planets in the same house, the same signs that we literally move into in the next 2 weeks. And it's while we're in between a pope right now. It's while we're seeing all the same things from 1534 and also now 1054, that literally there's going to be something that shows up celestially in our skies, and the world is going to see it, but there's going to be a Western world that acts like it ain't there, which is very it's like the ultimate gaslighting. Like, you guys are crazy. I don't see what you're seeing.
Right.
But
or they'll say it's a weather balloon or whatever.
Oh, that's a great example though of like Jupiter and Neptune. So that means, sure, the event happened 1054. I mean, an amazing thing to be able to see a supernova from being on Earth and in the middle of the day for 23 days. But that's what's crazy is like a weather balloon. That I remember being in that weird period of like, okay, Jupiter and Neptune just happened, and now we're moving into this new Pluto Aquarius. What's this? And and then the media is just acting like it's no big deal. And then ironically, as you follow that path of the weather balloon, that one night in Palestine, Ohio, when the whole explosion happens with the trains, is the same exact moment the balloon's passing over it. Nobody wanted to put that one together on TV or in the media. I was like, what?
Or they were putting it together just like at this time, probably the Pope and his cardinals were meeting and talking about it, but then acting like, don't write that one down, or let's not have that one in the record, because there is no record. How, when we talked about on the last show about how we were looking at some of the cardinals that could possibly be elected, there was one that was sent to Ukraine because of the Ukrainian-Russian war. And that's where it gets really, where you have to be able to know the history that these two sides of the Christian church have not found a harmony. We actually went deeper, and every year they meet to try and still work together, figure out a way to come back together someday, hopefully, since 1965, when they got rid of the excommunications. But what's interesting is that every year they meet. But what that means is you have Russia, which is Eastern Orthodox, which I would say you can use Putin, who is the only big bully pulpit of the Eastern Orthodox ways through the way that he runs that country. That all of the way that he is the executive of that country is saying publicly his Eastern Orthodox Christian views. And those are imposed on the public because if you can't be gay in Russia, they'll come after you in the streets, right? Like stuff like that. Like there's a lot of interesting Eastern Orthodox laws, right, that are imposed on the Russian people. So you got to look at Putin actually as the head of that church, right?
just how like you would like use at that time, it would have been, who was it? Oh yeah, Constantine the Ninth.
Or he's kind of like
Right.
not the Justinian, because he's at
Correct.
the different Moscow or whatever, when we were looking
Right.
at the different heads of the
Yeah, but
churches, or the different cities for the churches.
but that would be not good for that schism. It would just add to the schism as, oh, the Pope's sending over a Secretary of State to go deal with Ukraine and start attacking me and saying I'm not being Christian enough. Right? So it's the same argument. So that's where I think the Pope situation is going to be very more either A, bridging back, which I predict, I made kind of a prediction like, is this going to be a Pope that actually brings Russia back into the fold? I don't know if you remember me saying that, because it's on the rise in America and Russia, right? So that like, this whole Ukrainian war situation, what's even weirder is that you have Ukraine getting rid of Catholic or Christian churches, and that's part of the negotiations right now that Russia has. It's like number 7, that Ukraine can't get rid of Russian Orthodox churches in Ukraine. But Ukraine's been trying to stamp that out, and it's had the approval of the Pope, because the Pope's been, like the Pope's cardinals have been there. So like, you know, to me, I read that stuff and went, okay, I kind of understand. But now that I've seen the astrology and I've seen this, oh, this whole war is even bigger religious in every way you go.
Well, even when you think about the Pope's funeral, so I was just sitting here thinking,
It's Zelensky there.
First of all, why
Not
does the church
yeah.
still have so much authority, right? That's what I keep thinking. How has it managed to hold on to this authority, this much authority
true.
over all these years, and especially now, when one of the big issues that I looked into also was that it's something like 90 million in debt right now. It's financially not doing so well. But when you look at the funeral, and I mean, I'm not talking about, oh, Trump wore a blue suit or
Right.
whatever. All kinds of people wore a blue suit.
Yeah,
But the fact
including
that
Biden.
the fact that you have a funeral attended by our current president, our former president, all these world leaders, right, who come in, and they're not just attending to be there, and they're, okay, I'm sorry, I have to back up. So if we had, for example, the president go to the coronation of the king, he didn't. It was the vice president went, who went? It was just Jill Biden who went to.
Yes, it was just
Charles,
Jill.
Right. But if you have
Biden couldn't get down off the stairs.
he wasn't there though, right?
Because I mean, the guy had some problems getting up and down stairs, even when he was at the Vatican on his official Vatican visit
at the
with Joe
Vatican?
Biden. Like,
Okay.
they had to have a cardinal like hold his hand for him to walk him down a couple little stairs at the Vatican. So obviously they were like, you're not going to screw up the coronation of the king.
Or
You
the
can't
Pope,
even, or
right?
a pope, or, you know,
Yeah.
like Biden's not allowed to be around any of that stuff unless you're in the back. And they put him behind, ironically, a bunch of Iranian people that were at the funeral from Iran,
Yeah.
which
So-
he's a Catholic, but like he also, like Nancy Pelosi, was excommunicated to get communion because of his views on abortion.
Okay, so what's interesting is at the coronation of King Charles III, if our president was there, I'm sure he wouldn't be bowing or curtsying or whatever. When we see the president meet with the King of England, they don't bow in deference because
Correct.
we kind of overthrew them, right?
It's the only
But-
place that doesn't. It's the only leader that doesn't.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so even when it was with Queen Elizabeth II, Trump walked in front of her and she allowed him, and everybody went up in flames and went crazy about it.
Yeah.
She allowed him. And the same way when him and Melania showed up, they don't bow. And they're the only, I remember all this from 2018. They're the only leaders in the world that the monarch is like, we see that we have a historical past. We've worked through a lot of that through you helping us out from World War I because we borrowed the money from you guys to defeat Germany. And then in World War II, we lost our butts and you saved our butts and we got right? So that's the repair. And that's why Trump's speech at the dinner with the Queen was all about World War II and how we came together and how ever since then we're bonded forever. And, you know, that's the only leader that's allowed to not bow.
Right. And it's not even allowed because the American president would not, and it wouldn't matter who's the president, right? That the office of the president does not acknowledge the divine, whatever happened over the king to make them a special individual, right? Because we're not part of that kingdom anymore, or that commonwealth. So that makes sense to me. But what's interesting to me, my point was to say,
that they'll do it for the Pope, and they'll do it for in Israel. They'll do it in Israel too. They'll go to the wall in Jerusalem.
But I mean, I do believe, and someone was talking about respect, showing respect for cultural differences, and I do believe that. You go, and it's the idea of when I'm in someone's house, I'm not going to come in and raise a ruckus. I'm going to respect them and all of that. But you know, it was just interesting to see, for example, Melania and all the women putting the headscarf on. Right. And that's even, I always thought that was an older Catholic tradition, but maybe they requested that.
Well, she's from Slovenia, which that's interesting because
is she Catholic?
I don't know. That's what her past is very. There's like a bad documentary on her in 2020 on Amazon Prime I've watched, and you know, like the way that her dad groomed her to be a young little model in order to get her to get the contracts, in order to her to get to the head part of Slovenia and to get into college. And then she went to New York and found a photographer, and he's like, "You're like a robot." So he took all the nude pictures of her in order to get attention. And then she went to a party in Soho, and that's how she met Donald Trump. And then they fell in love. And then Donald Trump's the one who got a big photographer to put her in all the magazines nude on his plane and all that stuff to get the attention and show her around, showboat her. So it's like really an interesting story because it's like she even has a lawyer that's still there that literally, like, anytime anybody tries to do anything, like, she'll use her Slovenian lawyer in order to get money and all this weird stuff. So it's really and that's where I'd have to look into. I don't know if Slovenians are Catholic or if they're more Eastern Orthodox, but I think it kind of reminds me of like how maybe the traditional kings, like Henry VIII, like how Anne Boleyn would have had to been like, well, okay, like my husband just left the Catholic Church, so I'm going to follow what he's doing. And right now I'm giving homage to Spain, but I'm not. And then we're not going to talk to bishops anymore and cardinals from the Catholic Church, you know, and, you know, I don't have to respect the monastery, but it's really weird.
I mean, Melania is Roman Catholic. I just looked it up.
Oh, so. No way.
Yeah. So, I mean,
a Slovenian Roman Catholic. That is weird.
That's why she,
it makes sense.
Yeah. That's why she was talking to Trump the whole time and telling him what to do. And because I kept noticing that he was talking constantly and she was sort of telling him what to do. And yeah, anyway, because it is confusing to go to a Catholic service and you don't know what you're supposed to do, and you're not even invited up if they do communion. I didn't watch that much of
Nobody knows when to kneel and to stand up and what hymn to say.
It went for hours, and I have to say, I don't think
in the sun
there
outside
could not be any other event or funeral for someone in the world that would have as many world leaders. Because if the patriarch dies in the East, no one's going to go.
Right.
But we're still going for the Pope. And probably even if Mitt Romney had been president, I'm just thinking of like who's Mormon, right? You'd still, everyone shows up. So the Pope still has that aspect of being a secular and a world leader in some way.
An imperialistic
that's not secular,
religion.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that, as you had just found, the Catholic Church is in debt, and it's been American Catholics who've been giving the most money to the church, and obviously that's a sign to say, you better pick an American cardinal here as a pope if you guys want to survive. Because even though you might have a lot of followers in Latin America, they're broke. A lot of those countries are in a lot of, very liberal, like left-leaning. The poor are just everywhere. There's not a lot of infrastructure, right? So if you think about it, it's all switched now to where it's like, okay, who's got money? Well, obviously the American agenda of the Catholics is really big right now. And so there's influence, and all those world leaders are there to try and get some, because remember, the Pope's dead. So you're not talking to the Pope. They might do the funeral and have to go, I got to do this funeral. But they use all of their secretaries of state, all of their, whatever the world leader is, to be like, do you have a meeting with those? Because they know which cardinals, which are the ones that can sway 30 people out of the 133 or 20 of them. They meet with all of them. Guaranteed.
And they want the Pope to be of their nationality. And it's just like Henry VIII, before he left the church. It's the same thing happening. And I don't know if this time actually, here's what I was going to ask. So this time we're in the astrology of the Great Schism. Yeah. Undeniably. And because even Uranus being opposed to where it was, or where it is today, makes me think, wow, something's up. But then also, we might have this big supernova and all these crazy things are coming up. But do you think this could be about coming together more, or is there going to be an additional fracture? I
think you're going to see people coming together that haven't been together, and then those people that were together having a breakup. So either A, they come out with a really liberal pope who's going to pick Ukraine, right? And really now make the Russia-United States alliance kind of become more, well, that would be weird. It would make it more at odds because of the fact that the Americans are going to align with the Catholics more than the Eastern Orthodox Church. But if there's a pope that tries to bring, and that's where we got to use the history, because I do have that chart, right? Mm-hmm. To give people like a timeline of how long this has been going on. I mean, the Holy Wars, this is before the Holy Wars, which is kind of an interesting way to think about it if because like Holy Wars are a big thing, but this actually is, and they were not aligned during the Holy Wars either. That's what's kind of weird. So you go to 800, I'll try and.
You could take off my.
I'll just go. Oh yeah, I could do. Oh yeah.
You could at least have.
All right. Yeah. So, in 800, you have Charlemagne, who's crowned the emperor. The Holy Roman Empire begins. So this is where the beginning of the schisms ideas happening, because it becomes very imperialistic. It feels unfair. There's a Phoenician schism that begins in around 880. Then the Christianization of Kiev and Rus, the first East-West rupture. This is where Cerularius becomes the patriarch, which is like, let's call him the head cardinal of the Eastern Church or group.
Pope, yeah.
Then Leo of Ohrid attacks Latin rites. The supernova is happening all here. So this 1054 period is like, how I look at astrology is like bang, bang, boom, 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 boom. Then you have the actual moment that Humbert, representing the Catholic Church today, excommunicates the Eastern Orthodox Church, and then he does back. Then you actually have where Seljuk Turks take Baghdad, and Emperor Constantine dies the same period, right after that happens. And then you kind of go through the time period, and that's where during the Crusades, there's the Crusades that sacks Constantinople.
Right.
Then you have the Council of Lyons. Then you have a Council of Florence. So you get into the 1400s, and there's a union attempt, but it's rejected. So there's this idea in 1493 that they could figure it out, and they can't. It gets rejected. And then you go all the way to 1965. And that's where Pope Paul the Sixth deals with this very Orthodox Greek person from the church, Athenagoras, which is very Athena in there, Athens, and the excommunications are lifted, and the beginnings really start happening of talks on both sides. They meet during the celebration of St. Peter in June, at the end of June, and so forth. And so right now, it kind of is like, are we at a moment in the time where this all flips to where now you see the East and the West try to come together and form a new version of the Catholic Church? Or does the schism get wider, is the way that I would put it. The way that I would put this with the comet, the supernova, is the symbolism and omen. Did anyone connect the supernova to the schism back then? So for example, in the coinage, in the Byzantine Empire and stuff, there's the supernova energy that's around in the coin, right? That's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I was going to say I found some images too, but
oh no, show that one of the one in North America of the Puebloan people, which would have been really old Native Americans here.
I'm just scrolling at the moment.
Oh, that's fine. But
hang on.
Because it was seen in North America too.
Right. Well, here's one that's interesting because I'm here first.
Yeah.
But this is one from Belarus where this and this are supposed to be representatives of the supernova, and these are graves from around the 1050s. And apparently the way the supernova appeared in the sky was above the crescent moon or
after a new moon. Yeah, so when the crescent moon showed, they were then able to see it. So it happened on the new moon.
And then supposedly these are supposed to have some sort of reference as well, but let me go up to that. This is what's so fascinating.
And that's in North America,
Canyon,
yeah.
1054 supernova rock art panel. So
and there is no communication from the Puebloan people of North America, right? Like Columbus hadn't even come by for another 400 plus years, right? Or 400 years.
Yeah.
But right, so there's no connection yet and there's a crescent moon, and what's recorded is about right after the crescent moon, after the new moon, it being seen. I mean, I think the Chinese, which will show, have the best actual recollection of it, and people in Asia. But it's quite interesting that everybody in the world sees it, including you. If you add North America, it's not like the United Kingdom is or Italy is that much higher in the in where it's at to not be seen. That means if people saw it in the Northern Hemisphere, which is proof of the Puebloan people, that means there's no excuse that they didn't write about it,
unless they had a volcanic eruption at the same time, or
the weather was bad, but it was,
or it just was nonstop, or they were
23 days in the day. I think you would have seen it, and then of course 2 months afterwards, at night you would have seen it.
And it would have been a new object in the heavens.
And it's called the Crab Nebula because, I mean, it was red and white. And ironically, it would have happened over by the sign of the crab.
So, I mean, the thing is that with that much lack of evidence in one place, it has to start to look like somebody took it out of the record or someone didn't want it recorded at that particular time. And that's what's so crazy about it. Yeah, when even people are painting in caves about this, and I guess, yeah, I just realized it's so interesting that it's a star here, and it's depicted similarly in that on that gravestone where it's a star. So
right, so like while no medieval Christian chronicle explicitly linked the supernova to the Great Schism, there's fascinating evidence that at least the contemporary symbol did so. In 2022, a team of scientists, so this is during the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction in 2022, they analyzed a set of rare Byzantine gold coins from the final year of the Emperor Constantine's reign, right? Which was, he died
Or 1055.
1054 and a 55, right there, after the schism, they discovered that one particular issued coin classified as Constantine's Knight's Class 4 coins shows 2 stars around the emperor's head, which I showed, whereas most of the other coins in the reign only show a single star. The researchers proposed that this extra star is none other than the quote-unquote guest star. Now, the guest star comes from the Chinese. A subtle, perhaps even subversive depiction of the supernova. So then they were also saying, according to their interpretation, the coins in its indigenous code, the emperor's head in the center represents the sun. On one side, the morning star Venus is shown, which is what you would see, which we're in a morning Venus now, by the way. That it's familiar in the sight in the eastern dawn sky before sunrise. On the other side, a second star has been added, representing the unexpected star of 1054. They further suggest the symbolic reading, the 2 stars correspond to the 2 halves of Christonium, that's split in 1054.
Wow.
So actually it was done in the West, but he did it through money. That idea when we look at our dollar bill and we look on the back and we see the third eye sitting on the pyramid and the Latin that's sitting on there is the same ideas that come from that.
Yeah, so it's almost like the supernova became the symbol for the schism.
It did. Because that's where then, if this interpretation is correct, it reveals the Byzantine scholars were aware of the supernova but chose not to write about it openly due to prevailing attitudes. Instead, a clever individual memorialized it on coinage, notably the Eastern Roman Church. So the Eastern Roman Church, we've made our split, but there's still 2 beautiful things, but there is this kind of rare moment that happened that made it happen. So it is a divine moment to them. But then if you were to go outside the realm, people would have not drawn it because they would have been accused of doing the wrong thing. Outside this coin, we have no evidence of churchmen in 1054 publicly proclaiming the supernova as a divine sign about the schism. Given the lack of frank references, it seems most contemporaries avoided drawing a connection in writing. And then, because of course you would have probably been killed or excommunicated. But in later centuries, some writers did retrospectively find it poetic that a new star shone at the very moment Christonium was split as under. So there's writings of that. Really? Okay. And then for the people of 1054, we have scant evidence of anyone explicitly preaching that the heavens mark our schism. The nearest we get is in Ibn Butlan's chronicle tying the star to plague. But that is linking it to a scourge, not the schism itself, and comes from a Near Eastern context outside the Latin Greek church. So then you get to the Byzantine, we went into that, the Western Europe, the Islamic world. So that's where the Turks, right, rise in dominance, and then they end up killing Constantine, right? So actually, like the whole idea of the holy wars actually after the schism, the holy wars really begin happening in a weird way, which is kind of interesting.
Where's the part about China?
Yeah, it's right here.
I do have a picture of their document too. Not
I
that
just
I can read it, but someone else might be able to. I'm going to pull that up.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. So, one, it was 6,500 light years away. So it's kind of interesting because we're now finding that new planet that supposedly has life that's shown up in the last 2 weeks during all this, right? I'd have to see. Hey Siri, use ChatGPT and tell me about that article and what the light years away, that new planet that might have life on it is. Oh.
Okay, I won't.
Hey Siri. use ChatGPT and look up for the article about a new planet that might have life on it from a couple weeks ago and how many light years it is away from Earth.
I can't browse the internet in real time, but you can find the latest article about the new planet.
She's telling you to do it yourself.
That's the
not
problem. My
nice.
Apple is having problems with. I can just look it up really quick because I think this is going to be kind of weird if it is similar. Planet with life in the news. So. Okay, it is. How ironic, too, that it was found in the constellation of Leo, so close to where the Crab Nebula would have been, too. And, gosh, they won't give me the stupid light years away? Like, it should. Come on. You gotta be kidding me. A whole tech article and, like... $120 light years away.
And
so this Crab Nebula is way farther out.
Interesting.
Isn't that weird? Or there was just that new study about particles in Russia when somebody dies, that they trace the particles and it ended up at the end of our whole entire galaxy.
Yeah, you posted that, right?
Yeah.
I saw that. So I
really weird.
I looked at the video and it didn't get to the end, and I didn't see where.
Well, they just went off that one dead body, but for some reason it did pick a spot and went and dropped down. So, is that quote unquote where St. Peter is, and where Jesus came from? I don't know, but
which direction was it? Did they? Like, which direction did the particle go? Or
it went all the way to the end of our galaxy.
And what part of the sky did you see?
I didn't get into that part because the guy had just posted it and I haven't had the time yet to go look deeper. I need to look into that one. But it's okay. So 6,500 years away, light years away. So the planet that they think they found life with the James Webb Telescope in the last couple of weeks is only 120 light years away. Even though that's pretty far away, but still, like, this is 6,000% more, whatever, right? Yeah. But it was the East Asian astronomers, quote unquote astrologers, the Chinese chronicles of the Song dynasty, which it was Emperor Song at that time, and it was called the Guest Star, a star that suddenly appeared where none had been seen before. I like that a lot. Like, Chinese astrology is really amazing. You and I even found on this show just, gosh, I don't know, a couple months ago, that one moment when actually we're in the same astrology of when the Chinese astrologers actually figured out Chinese astrology and found the stars that created. That's kind of weird, too. That's happening at the same time. But it became visible in the summer of 1054. It was observed beginning in the dawn sky. So that tracks with what the Byzantine Empire's coins are, right? That tracks, and that's Northern Hemisphere. So it's tracking with everybody seeing it. And that means, hold on, let's just do the sun with Venus in front. So when the sun sets, that's weird because it's Venus as an evening star. So that's why they're showing it on both sides. So the coin is correct, meaning if Venus is in front of the sun, when the sun sets, Venus is up after sunset, and that means Venus is up. So in the dawn sky, it would have been on the opposite side. So if you actually think about the way that you're tracking that from a geo and then a helio perspective, that would have been interesting. So you would have been able to see it in the morning before the sun rose.
So when was that new moon? Like, I want to see what the chart looked like when they first would have seen it. Or did it happen exactly on the new moon when they first saw it?
So the date is in the summer, so it's in July.
The one thing we looked at said July 4th. The other one said circa July 10th, so around that time.
Okay, hold on one second
so-
here. I will find this one out.
I'm just curious about what new moon. I guess it would have been a new moon in Cancer, right?
Yeah,
that's depicted in the artwork. Or
let's have some fun and just try a couple new moons forward and see what we see here. Like, here's in June. There's Venus and Jupiter. So that would have been interesting because on the eastern sky, it wasn't just Venus. It would have been Venus. The two brightest stars as far as planets go, right? Would have been setting every night.
But that's in June.
Yeah. So in July, so it's July the 4th, right?
Yeah.
So July the 4th, look at that. So that's what's crazy is there we go. Let's do the days now and go back.
So Venus is right at the top there, or.
So on July 4th, it would have been a balsamic moon. And that's why you would have seen the dark crescent moon at dawn, because the only time you can see a dark moon is right before the sunrise. That's why it's the moment of when women and their menstrual cycle have their periods, and it's a red crescent moon. And then they would have seen a red crab nebula with the dark moon.
Just imagine.
Right, so I'll move that.
You wake up, you go outside to tend to your flocks or whatever, and all of a sudden that's what you see. Wouldn't they have thought it was the second coming of Christ? That's why, that may also be why there were these arguments coming up again. Well, no, already the schism is the excommunication happens right after that. So it had to have ramped all of the arguments up.
Right.
It intensified everything.
So see, this would have been anywhere on the planet in the morning, everywhere around the world, when the sun was about to rise. Mercury would have risen too. You would have been able to see that on the horizon. It was far enough away from the sun. And it was after a retrograde, trying to catch back up for the Cazimi. Mars was there, but that's a Mars on the other side of the sun. So Mars wouldn't have been able to be seen. But that's where that dark moon would have started beginning, even though it's technically not there. It's almost a 45-degree angle. It's not 30 degrees yet. It's still that is a balsamic moon beginning, right? So you would have been able to only see the moon at 4 a.m., 3 a.m. if I was over here, but we would have been able to see it. And that means that the Crab Nebula would have been tracking somewhere in Gemini tropically, possibly Cancer. I think the idea of the crab is the white and the red, and the idea that the sun was in Cancer at that time, and then on top of it, but that would have been the moment that the idea of the crescent moon at dawn. Because they're saying if it was discovered July 4th, that's July 4th in the morning, what everybody in the world would have seen in their morning, no matter where, is a balsamic moon beginning. And
yeah.
So it actually, that's what's so wild is the history is correct that we were able to go to the date and see it is a balsamic moon. And I love showing people why you can't just use only whole sign in life. Because there is exact positions, especially where you're at and so forth, of like how the sky would have been and where the house systems, and especially knowing the exact position of your ascendant means everything instead of just in the sign. So that's where it's kind of this most beautiful kind of interesting event. What's even weirder is it would have been a lot to be seen in the night from the sunset to the sunrise, meaning you would have seen, because you're seeing Saturn, right? You would have seen Jupiter and Venus setting, right? And then you're coming in to watch Saturn come up, right? At midnight. And by the time you get to 3 a.m. when the Crab Nebula and the balsamic moon shows up, Saturn's at the top for everybody in the world on that day. and then boom, this Crab Nebula is popping up with this dark reddish moon that starts beginning. The period begins.
That would be crazy. I can't imagine what it would have been like.
So you would have been able to see every planet but Mars.
But apparently in China, that was a good omen, I guess, maybe at that time.
So that's what I'll go into. Yeah, so because this is where it gets astrological, is that, so it was observed in the beginning in the dawn sky just before sunrise, which I just proved, in the direction of the constellation housing the star Zeta Tauri. So that's what's weird. The moon at the end of Taurus right there. The Chinese noted that it could even be seen during the daytime. So that means it would have tripped them out like, okay, the dark moon's disappearing, but this thing's staying with it. So that's why it would have been a guess, like, what is this? And it was shining as brightly as the planet Venus in the morning sky. Even though it was an evening star, then they're giving the idea of that there's never an object in the morning sky that bright except Venus, that it was as bright as that. Mm-hmm. Then that it rays stemming in all directions and reddish white color, and says it was visible in daylight for 23 days. After a few weeks, it could no longer outshine the sun's glare, but it remained visible at night for about 22 months. Oh, not 2 months, 22 months. So that makes the whole, how did they not during the schism even talk about this thing in Western historical context? Because it was up in the sky for 22 months in total. So I don't care if you're Southern Hemisphere or Northern Hemisphere, that's 2 years where everybody's seeing it.
And how can you not be having a church argument all about somebody who was born at a significant astrological moment where wise men could even follow this great thing to his
And
birth?
that would have been when Saturn was conjuncting Neptune is when it ended, ironically.
But if it's in the morning sky and you're in the west, if you're in Rome, where do you see it? Do you see it in the east?
You would have seen it in the east.
So were they thinking, we better not record this because it's saying
the
the east
is right. Correct.
I mean,
if it would have been with the Jupiter and Venus throughout that period of the schism, that would have been conjuncting, right? And then seeing them still every night sunset, right? You would have been like, after the sun sets, you would have been like, oh, it's in the west? Oh. Especially with Jupiter, Venus, that's the benefic. So, but they were probably reading it as, we're the right side. What is this odd guest that's coming in, or this weird thing that's trying to disrupt the natural order of the planets and everything like that?
I mean, so you can see,
and they
in
could have
China,
thought it was a comet at
they
first,
see
too.
it as a good omen. Like, this is going to be a good thing for the emperor.
Yeah, so the Chinese, they measured its position relative to nearby stars. It appeared close to the Tianguan. And that's one of the major stars when you do your Chinese astrology. So that's why they even took it more seriously. The event was recorded with wonder and with the concern for its astrological import. One court astronomer, Yang Weed, I want to find out about this astrologer. He's awesome. He reported the new star to the emperor and offered an interpretation, like a true astrologer should. Don't go into a book. Be your own astrologer. Because the star did not trespass on the lunar mansion of B, which is Wall, which you can look in your own charts and find where all your lunar mansions are Chinese-wise. They go off lunar mansions. We also then saw that the Arab astrology added mansions to it all, right? We're in houses with rulerships and there's mansions, and the moon likes to sit in certain places in mansions. This is also used in Vedic. It's used everywhere. But it did not trespass on that specific lunar mansion, and shone with a yellow glimmer. It portended the emergence of a person of great value rather than disaster. All the officials proceeded to congratulate the emperor on this heavenly sign. Chinese astrology often saw guest stars or comets as omens tied to imperial fortune. So another imperial thing. But when the star finally faded in 1056, when Saturn and Neptune started to conjunct in Aries at the end of it there, coming into Taurus, the song She notes its disappearance, which would have taken to mean that the guest or the phenomenon had departed after fulfilling its role. So what was that role? Right? So then also Japanese observers likely saw the supernova well, but there was no Japanese diaries. But a 13th century Japanese chronicle later mentions a bright new star. So likewise, in the Islamic world, at least one account of 1054 supernova exists. The report of Ibn Butlin, a Christian physician from Baghdad. And his observation is preserved in the Arabic biographical compendium of physicians. He wrote, a spectacular star that appeared in the year 446, that's 1054 CE, in the constellation Gemini, like I just said, in the autumn of that year, 14,000 people were buried in Constantinople. Oh no, 14,000 people were buried. Wait, hold on. Spectacular. I missed a whole line there. Sorry, I'm zoomed in. You guys aren't getting to see the zoomed in. It doesn't do that for some reason. Appeared and then he goes, and he linked it to a devastating plague outbreak. One of the most famous epidemics of our time occurred when the spectacular star appeared in Gemini. In the autumn of that year, 14,000 people were buried in Constantinople. Thereafter, in the middle of the summer of 1055, the majority of the people of the Fustat, Cairo, died. So most of the people in Cairo, Egypt, died. In other words, he saw that the new star as a herald of pestilence, an ominous sign that straddled east and west, Constantinople and Cairo, both suffering. This is a striking example of how medieval observers often associated celestial phenomena with earthly events. By contrast, what about Western Christian Europe? Here lies a curious historical puzzle. Virtually no European chronicle from the whole 11th century mentions the supernova. But there was one theory of the chaos of the schism, and that's where that the church leaderships deliberately ignored the celestial event to avoid it being interpreted as a bad omen during a precarious time. Both sides.
But right when that thing was being seen, the Pope or who are the officials of the Pope get the idea, we're taking this excommunication paper over there and slapping it down in Hagia Sophia and getting rid of
it almost feels like they're doing that intentionally to take the distraction off of that movie, like on Netflix, Don't Look Up. I love that movie. Like,
I haven't seen it.
Oh, it's so great. It was very much about like the election and how, there's actually an asteroid coming to the Earth, but everybody's acting like, or a comet. No, it's not going to come here. And they kind of show the right wing candidate as being like, don't look up. No, there's nothing bad happening. They're lying to you. And then finally everybody starts seeing it and then they don't have a plan. And
when did that come out?
Like 2 years ago.
Wow. I do. Yeah. I remember you talking about that at that time.
Yeah. So, but that's what's kind of crazy is then it does go to where I actually really believe that because it was this Zellman and Thomas that suggested that church fathers would naturally have chosen to ignore the celestial event rather than taking a chance on its misinterpretation as a portent and politically necessary rather than ideology or failure of observation is offered as the cause for the absence. I would say the political necessity. In other words, the Great Schism itself may explain why Western records are silent, which I would definitely say because you're seeing it across the world, and then that's where the Puebloan people are. And so that's where it really kind of leads to where we're at right now, man, which I would say is like, it's the Saturn and Aries trigger at 0 degrees with these planets all where we're going to have that definitely is going to bring something like this up. And really it's going to be flipped though. It's going to be when Jupiter ingresses into Cancer during Gemini season. What's crazy is that Crab Nebula was seen in the Gemini constellation, and that was 1,000 years ago. So if we do the precession, it probably was in Gemini, not Cancer, or I would have to go a little bit deeper and look at the precession and see. But the fact that it was 1,000 years ago the precession is a lot different than now, meaning closer to the normal, right?
Yeah. I just think it's so fascinating. And, you know, here's my theory about why there's no record of it. I feel like maybe the Western Church had decided this is our sign. It's the second coming of Christ, or it's Revelation, whatever. I'll bet there was an official communication even from the church.
And
Couldn't
no
there have been
pope.
Of an official, or, oh yeah. so
There's
they're
no
not making
pope
any
to
sense of
officiate it either.
So I'm sure, I'll bet that they were thinking it was some kind of sign of the second coming. I would have to look through Revelation and see. I'm sure somebody out there knows. It probably even relates to something in Revelation, because you know that that crescent moon is under the feet of Our Lady of Guadalupe, right? It's something that was considered divine in Aztec culture. It makes you wonder, does it even go back to something like this that was commemorated or remembered?
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, I just feel like there must have been some communication, or they were convinced this is going to be a complete transformation. And then instead what happens is the church falls apart, which would have been a huge message that, no, actually you're doing something wrong.
Right.
So
What I'm going to do is I'm going to save that chart, because that's pretty fucking badass that we figured out the chart just by give us the date and just like kind of like, oh, let's actually see if it's true. It is true. There's enough historical records. Even the fact, I think it's the Pueblan people that they put the crescent moon.
right.
Right. So you have indigenous people of the Americas doing the same thing that the Byzantine Empire is doing, more in a Greek way of like showing Venus and this thing. And when, like I proved, would have been on the opposite sides of night and day, and or sunset and sunrise. And it would have been on either side. So this kind of like the two forms of the split. But then you have the Chinese, which they're the ones who give the more specifics. If they counted it, that astrologer was on that. I want to know who that guy is.
Yeah, we need to look up his work.
He's a good astrologer. He kept the 23 days and he kept the 22 months. That guy tracked it and then let the emperor know, okay, it's done.
Yeah.
And then, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this chart, because this is bad. It's like this, okay, like discovery of the supernova. Okay, yeah, all right. And what I'm going to do, and I know that everybody's going to love this, let's all together just go another month or two away at the new moons, when we're going to see Jupiter Cancer, Saturn Aries, Neptune Aries, and Pluto Aquarius. We're right here.
Okay.
We're right there. It's not months, so like it's not years away. It's not, right. We are in the we're in the pocket. Right? We're in the pocket. We're in the pocket right now. So let's have some fun and look at the next new moon, May 26th. So what's really interesting about this new moon is it's going to be happening right here in Gemini. Let's just look at this one first. Jupiter's still going to be in Gemini though. But it is interesting because as this is happening, there's that Saturn just ingressed into Aries, right? And also Neptune in Pisces, in Aries too. And Venus, now the morning star, and when the sun sets, it's Jupiter again up. But it's only for this new moon, because after that, now it'll be Jupiter. After the new moon passes Jupiter, right? We can't see Jupiter right now. So like, that's the weird part, is the Jupiter aspect of things takes a minute to see. But would it be this one? Maybe. I don't think that, maybe. Let's look at the next one. That's the one that I feel like. So June 25th, new moon in Cancer with Jupiter in Cancer and Saturn and Neptune in Aries. And that's kind of interesting too, because we're going to see Uranus be at the very end of Taurus, which in the chart that I ran for the moment that now that would have been for us here. but it would have been the moon in Taurus anywhere in the world pretty much that night, back in 1054 on July 4th. There's the moon. I didn't know this. I just did this live, right? There's the moon on the Uranus that we're going to be transiting. And there's Venus. And that's what's interesting. Venus being the morning star. And in this case, this was when Venus, of course, was the opposite, the evening star. But this new moon has all the same pieces that they had, except they had Jupiter in Leo. So what's kind of weird is that it could be this Jupiter Gemini that's the same as where the sun is, right? But this is where Jupiter was in Leo and it was in Cancer, so it was a sign over. So it would maybe be the Gemini new moon that's coming on May 26th. Although I would put with the fact that the conclave is happening right now.
Weird, huh?
That
What
I would
kind of
say
hope is
if
this
I had
going
to put
be?
my money on it, oh man, that one's a hard one. But I would say both have Saturn and Aries. It was 1 degree Saturn and 39 minutes. And look at this new moon in Cancer. Saturn at 1 degree and 40 minutes. The exact Saturn return
Of that
of
supernova?
the supernova is on the new moon Cancer.
okay.
So at the end of the day, I would pick the June 25th. And you know what's so weird is my son this is the due date, right? June 23rd and right in this moment. So I've been looking at, and it's so weird. I'm like, well, this is crazy.
You have to
Maybe
always
he's a
have
return to the
most-
Crab Nebula.
He could be, or he could be Victor
Or he was
II.
he was there during that process. You know?
Yeah.
But that is mind-blowing. It's the Saturn return.
Of the
And in this
supernova.
case, you had 1,000 years, like, geez, there's 3 for every century. So this is like the 300th and something Saturn return. What if it was like the 333rd? That would be weird.
Well, I know you'll be figuring that out later, probably.
I mean, I could just figure that out on a calculator. Like old school astrology, you have to use a calculator, right?
But in any case, is that day a special day, right? Like if you just looked at the astrology of that day, not knowing all of this, what would you say about that day?
Oh gosh, I mean, I've been looking at which day? The day that we're going to
The
come.
25th.
Oh, the 25th.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the most significant moving into a new season of a solstice ever. It's a new moon with Jupiter, square Neptune, square Saturn. That's on the other cardinal point. While Uranus is at the very end, at the last degree in Taurus, about to ingress into Gemini. While in a less than year period, you've seen 2 of the outer planets move into new signs: Pluto into Aquarius, Neptune into Aries. We've seen the largest amount of conjunctional astrology since the 13. What was the year of the plague? 40s. The 1345 and then 1347 was it started, and the astrologers started to see the planets do the conjunctions in 1345 for the Pope. So bigger than that. So personally, this astrology is way more intense and way bigger than then.
Because it's also the Saturn return of the supernova.
It's the Saturn return of the supernova, and we're with a North Node Saturn. They were with a North Node Chiron. We just finished North Node Chiron. And so that North Node just was with Saturn, and it's close to Saturn during it. And then, so if I do 1054, so I just wanted to find the years, and then I want to divide that by 29 and a half. This is the 33rd.
The 33rd Saturn return?
Oh,
Or
wait,
no,
well-
how are you?
Well, I was doing 20. How many? Yeah, because how many cycles? So if you do 33 times 33, right? So, or 33 times 29 and a half, right? because every Saturn return or Saturn cycle is 29 and a half years. So if you do 33, so it's actually 33 Saturn returns times the 29.5, we should get to that 900. And yep, I had it wrong. It's not 333. It's the 33rd Saturn return, the Mason number. This
David.
is going to be the most mind-blowing experience. This is why this was the pocket from every direction I've been saying for so long. And other astrologers know this too. You know, good astrologers know.
Crazy. I mean,
right? I mean, the fact that I just did that in my head was like, I just want to show you on the calculator. I mean, I had it as 333 because I was like, wait, hold on, 3. No, let me use the calculator really quick. 33rd Saturn return.
Sometimes I sit here and I think, we're just making stuff up. We're just blowing things out of proportion. But no, I mean, why do we always stumble on these things? But you're the one who knows how to actually figure out the math behind it and why it's significant. But this is amazing.
So then if you do a Nostradamus trick that I've learned, and we divide the 33rd by 7.
And the 7 was because?
Because every 7, that's what he told his son by giving the actual date of the future when the pandemic or the plagues will end, the seeding of a new republic will begin, the clashes that the monarchs would be having and all the problems would start to be for the people in a good way, which is 1732. I have that chart, right? And so that's when I went, okay, he's not wanting you to look at how many years. He's wanting you to look at what's the chart he gave as the preface, which is March 1st, 1555. And then that's when you see Jupiter at 0, Libra, opposite of the Saturn, but it is Saturn in Aries at 15 degrees. So it's like Saturn in Aries has already begun and Jupiter's balancing it on the other side. But it's 7 Saturn cycles of 0 Aries. And so that's when I started to build on my own kind of system of like, okay, the first 3, and then you go to the then 4, and starting to use John Dee and also Pythagorean's math and Pythagorean's, quaternary system and the artificial quaternary system that John Dee came out with, but also the trans numbers between. So in quaternary, there's trans numbers. So it's like if it's 1, 3, 5, like it's 1, 3, 5, and then 2 sits underneath the 1 and the 3, and the 23. It gets really gnarly, and then that gets to. Anyway, that's really interesting because that means that 33 is really interesting that it's popping up. That if we were to look at it, 7, 7, 7, 7. It's not the 4th, 7th series because if you were to have 33. So what it means is that like enough have come and this is the one that takes it to the next millennium. That the supernova that showed up in 1054 started the new millennium. And if you think about the schism and the idea of how the world's been formed in the map you showed, we've lived this story for 1,000 years.
So we're moving on to.
So the idea of what is all the chapters in Nostradamus's prophecies book? What are they called? Centuries.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And it's 10 centuries, which equal a millennium.
So here's another, there's a couple of things I'm thinking about. But at this time, or in 1054, China thought it was a great star, right? They see this as the great guest or the fortunate thing. Because it wasn't
trespassing on the lunar mansion of the wall, which is why they have a great wall, which is the lunar mansion of BI. So
if we could look at
lunar mansion, B, Chinese. Okay, here we go. The light, the guy took out the trash, just came in, and I looked in the lights, and my eyes were like, eh. Okay, in traditional astrology, the term lunar mansion refers to that. Let's okay, here's the 28 lunar mansions in the feng shui. So, okay. Neck. What did B mean again? It meant wall.
Wall, yeah.
Ox, girl, void, room, wall. Number 14. The wall lunar mansion B is the 14th in the series of the 28 constellations of the Chinese astronomy. Since the constellations indicate places in the sky where the moon resides every night, they also called 28 lunar mansions, or, in the 28 Shu. The wall is also the 7th lunar mansion in the northern palace of the great mansion of the Black Turtle, Zhan Wu. So let's do the wall lunar mansion B, and let's look at a better site that gives us more. Here we go. Wall, Pegasus, Andromeda. Okay, so because the way that Chinese astrology works is they divide up the whole 360 degrees of all the constellations into 28. Similarly, of course, you see in Vedic astrology with the nakshatra system of 13 degrees for all around the zodiac, right? And they break them off in the nakshatras and break those up into 4. So Chinese do a 28 system. So wall is where Pegasus and Andromeda is. So because it didn't intrude there, right? So representing walls, the library. So it's not trying to take away knowledge or the library of the data of the emperor, right? Which is so weird because, like you said earlier, because after the split happens during the Holy Wars, like the Orthodox Eastern churches, the Christian left, let's call it, or right, I don't even know, the West took some of the Holy Lands and destroyed the libraries because the Orthodox guys were there.
But they destroyed the libraries in Constantinople.
Yeah, in Constantinople, right? Yeah. So it's the black tortoise.
What is the
here we
tortoise?
go. Black turtle snake is one of the 4 symbols of the Chinese constellations. It's usually depicted as a tortoise intertwined with a snake. The character can mean martial or warrior, so it's not intruding on the martial or the warrior. I love how it goes always deeper. That's where you kind of, every system goes deeper. But they do not have any literal meaning of tortoise and snake, but both tortoise and snake are known to hibernate during winter. The image of intertwined tortoise and snake likely symbolizes a state of inner struggle. So it's the opposite, although we saw the inner struggle in the church. And thus implies the season of winter. So the English translation, black, dark, mysterious warrior. So it didn't come in that place, and it came with yellow and white, which in Chinese astrology is very positive in feng shui, right? And it would have came from the East, which the Chinese love. The West can sometimes be bad. Even in Western astrology, the West is kind of like, that's where everything sets. Something rising is good. And that's the other place, is in that constellation where Pegasus is, right? If you go back right here and you look here, or where was I? I was here. And oh, look at this, the black tortoise with the snake. So this is actually what it looks like. So, but the main thing is that it has no connection to this. It's not in that area. That's why it was not looked at as bad. So my big question, I want to go back to the one page that I was able to, here. So where Pegasus is, right? So when you look, it's Pisces. Like they said, the winter. It's sleepy, but it's got the snake. It's hiding. That's why that area is B in Chinese astrology, right? So it didn't come there. It came, in this case, it would have came north. That's south, moving towards, yeah, that's Aquarius to Pisces. Okay. Right? So the big question is, as a Chinese astrologer, where did it actually come from? So that's where we go, well, I guess Wall deals with, let's do Chinese constellations. Here we go. And then, all right, yeah. Oh, look at this. Oh, this is badass. This is beautiful, actually. I can't read Chinese, but I'll figure this out by some stars. Oh yeah, that's looking like. Oh yeah, there's the twins right there. So this symbol, right here is where it would have been, above my head. You can see the twins. Oh, sorry. You can see the twins. You can see. Oh gosh, this thing's huge. I'm gonna save this motherfucker. It's sick. Okay. You could see the twins above my head. And then, oh my God. You can see the twins here. You could see the Leo. Oh man, I'm going to have to move this thing. Let me just save this thing. All right. I'm going to open it so it doesn't mess with us anymore. Here we go. All right, so I'm zooming in close. There's from what looks like Gemini. There's what looks like the Leo constellation. Yeah, and the intersects. That's the other part that I want to see. Yeah, because that's going to be right there where that could be the Aries Libra points of the intersects right there, actually. So it means that it could have come from up here because their symbols are not really well defined. Either way, I'm going to have fun and I'll figure it out in 1 minute using Wikipedia because they at least list them all. Oh, here we go. Oh, the 3 enclosures are each enclosed by 2 wall astrums designed by Yuan. Low wall, fence, enclosure, not to be confused with the lunar mansion wall. So the 28 mansions, okay, and the symbols. Oh, here we go.
Wasn't it B?
Weld, Jing.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
Yeah, there it is right there. So they would have looked at this associated with the vermilion bird. One of the 4 symbols of Chinese astronomy, the Well Mansion is located in the constellation Gemini in Western astronomy and includes the first star of Well. Yeah, it's a well. So the English name is Well, or other parts of Gemini could have been Battle Axe or North River, Celestial Wine Cup. And even if it was maybe in Cancer, although I presume it definitely was in Gemini based off what I saw just solar-wise. And the precession was different 1,000 years ago. That, yeah, honestly, be well, right? It would have been like, oh my God, I was in the well.
So well as in good, not well as in water?
I would say
Or
well
both.
as in water, but meaning like a place where you can refresh. Because even the Chinese, the Western, the Vedics look at Taurus to Gemini as heaven. It's heaven. That's the heavens. That's where the Pleiades sit. That's where the bull sits. That's where of course, Algol's there, but the 7 sisters. It's the place in the sky that is the most beautiful. Right? So it is the beautiful well. It is where the heavens are. That's why if you were to look at the old idea of astrology from Aries to Libra, those are the signs, the first signs. Those are the ones that are at the top that are beautiful at night that you would see. When you start seeing in the south, you know you're in winter, right? Like, you know, you actually, it's one of those things that you just don't, you see them when you're in winter. Right? So that's another weird part. But when you're in the sun with them, and it's only during sunrise that you see something there, that you know that you're in that space. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Or you know that, oh, Venus is setting after the sun, and I can see it. I know that that area west is directional towards that we're still in the same place. Right? Simple parts of it.
Huh.
So there's also old man, but I don't think it was old man.
So you're trying to figure out where it actually was in the sky?
Well, I was going to see if I go to 1054 supernova really quick and do the chart, like, I'm sure they have constellation Taurus. So that's where Western, it would have been Gemini, but that's Taurus 1,000 years ago. Maybe not, maybe now it is in the precession. That's kind of what, so yeah, July 4th, 1054, right ascension 5 hours, declination 22, that would have been north. Galactic coordinates, that's where we could have fun and put it in. Historical records. Here's actually the Chinese guest star, like the Chinese records of it.
I wish
So
we could read
that well looked like Gemini, which is kind of crazy. There's well right there. To the, I'll show you. Good thing I looked at that.
Yeah.
Right here. And why is that significant? It's the first moment in the way that whoever highlighted this, you see all three, and they're aligned right here. And then it's like this movement up. So obviously that's where the well Chinese symbol is, right? Now I could be wrong, but I'm not going off of what I'm, you know.
Oh, it says, I have this astronomical description. It was in the first year of the Jihe reign period. A guest star appeared to the southeast of Tianguan. You already said that, right?
Right.
Zeta Tauri. It was visible during the daylight for 23. I think we looked at that already. But yeah. So anyway.
I mean, that's where it's like, I still can't see. My eyes have not cleared up.
Since that guy came in?
Yeah, that when I looked at the light, my eyes are just like stuck in the brightness still. They're kind of coming back.
Maybe you're just seeing
Maybe, yeah. It's kind of weird because I don't know if anybody's like really kind of tried to break this one down in a long time as an astrologer. So maybe it is like my eyes are going.
Well, I'm wanting to know, like, you can do a Western astrology chart for back in time. Is there a way you can do a Chinese astrology chart from today and a Chinese astrology chart from then?
Oh, yeah.
Or do they even do that? I don't know how
so-
to do anything about Chinese astrology.
Oh, yeah, there is a way to do it. It's on the Supernova. Oh, won't these Chinese systems won't go back farther to 10.
1054.
I'll have to get a hold of a Chinese astrologer to run me a chart that goes. I mean, we just saw it, but we can't read it. That ephemeris of it.
We could probably put an AI.
Maybe.
In it, but yeah, then we'd have to figure it out.
But that is mind blowing to me that it's the Saturn return. It's the 33rd return. So there is a
That
Masonic
right there,
aspect to
not
it.
only Masonic, but Christ, the age of.
Oh, that is interesting. Now that's where I would have been like, don't get all the Christians so excited and acting like I'm part of the church.
Where do you think the Masons got 33 from? I mean,
A completely
that's what I
different.
assume.
They didn't get it from that.
So Christ died at 33 because of some other reason that existed already?
The
Probably.
same way that it's the same year that same with Horus, same with all the deities in the world. So it's
But
not
for the
just
church,
Jesus. And that's what I think the hard truth is how many deities were born of a virgin and died at 33 on the cross, and a lot.
So from whatever
So-
angle you look at it, it could be Zoroastrian or something. We are at the 33rd Saturn cycle.
Saturn cycle.
From that time.
From that exact moment it happened.
So we're thinking it's June 25th, 2025, that something else might happen.
Yeah, and you know what's even weirder? July 4th, in the old calendar system, it's 9-10 days back that they, or what do they go forward? They go forward? Yeah. No, they go back.
No, yeah. So
They go
that
back.
would be,
So that's June.
yeah.
25th.
So yeah, you found that day. Through the
So we're
charts.
also coming back to a new moon that's building up the same way in the same time period. Because actually that'll be the real truth, right? It's like so the July 4th discovery is at 17. Okay, so they do go forward. July 4th is in that old day still really far ahead. By
In the-
13
at the calendar,
degrees
that
here
one,
when it's
yeah.
only right. So yeah, so no, but it is interesting though that it is a new
We should
moon.
see your chart. Can you pull up your screen?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it is a new moon in Cancer, and that was a new moon in Cancer that was during its visibility, and it would have been in that direction of Taurus, like I said, into Gemini, right? So really, it's in the Pleiades. It would have been with the Seven Sisters, which might have been another reason why it would have been looked at as good. It was also at 22 degrees of declination, so it would have not been, it would have been, you would have been able to see it on the same understanding of the ecliptic, which is wild. Wouldn't have been like a comet that's way above and just swoops in, right? And kind of does whatever it wants, like a sperm. That's what a comet is it's cosmic sperm. Literally.
So this is like a embryo or a spark of life, or I mean,
Well,
it's something
if we
that's-
want to go deep spiritually and look at it astrologically from the science, it's a star reaching its highest next level point and releasing energy as it goes into the bigger the dwarf becomes, and it expels all of its energy and particles to go wider and to go brighter, right? So it goes through levels, and a supernova is gigantic, right? It's near the end, though, of the star. It's the last big bangs that come out of it. So like a micronova is why our sun's very yellow, leaving white, why it's acting up, why the pole shift's getting weird, is our sun's ready to go and evolve and create a micronova, which would send all of its particles and all the radiation and all the plasma and everything around the whole solar system and reach all other parts of the galaxy. So we have to remember that when that if they were able to see that, that means it's similar to a solar flare that the particles of that are hitting us or them.
And they're running around excommunicating
So like
each other.
people think it's just our sun and, oh, worry just about our solar flares. No, it's outside our solar system. The other plasma, the other events that are happening in other systems, and they are micronovaing or they are having their supernovas. Those particles travel. They don't stop. And we are in all of that, and our magnetic field's weak. And so we get so there's an ascension part of it, but there's also the hard part of that ascension, and also the reality that you want to move to a new earth. Well, yeah, I mean, it's going to almost be like how I couldn't see there for a minute. For like 4 minutes, that light didn't go away, but I was also looking at an old Chinese chart of the ephemeris of the lunar mansions of when that thing showed up. So that's kind of interesting to me. But that people have to realize like something's showing up. That's been my big prediction anyway during this period, right? Is that we were going to see some major event about more planet. Everybody's thinking about the UFO. I think what comes before the UFO or what happens before any of that is a celestial event that everybody can see. And that's when we start going, okay, something's going on. And that's just the right kind of thing in this moment, this next couple of months with everything happening. That will get maybe people to start getting out of their stupid bickering over little things. I'm not talking politically or world power, though. I'm talking about personal, like us as a collective. Because that would have been a magnificent... Imagine looking up for 23 days and seeing that. That 23 days would erase 23 years of bickering. That 23 days would erase 23 lifetimes of crap.
And maybe that's why the church had to ramp it up so much, because people were looking at this other thing and probably about ready to think, okay, this is a new religion.
Yeah.
I keep having new theories about what people were doing because there's no record. So that's all I can do, but I just can't imagine today what that would be like.
Oh, right. I know.
That even then, when you don't have all the light pollution, just imagine how bright it was.
I know. The fact that it was seen in the daytime, you have the only things that can be seen celestially is the sun and the moon when it's in some part of the phase, whether it's waxing or waning, right? Especially in the waning phase, it's a little bit easier, right? When the sun's getting like ready to either set or, sometimes you'll look up and you'll see that moon coming in, right? But that's it.
Yeah.
Right? There is nothing else. So the fact that it was being seen at the same time is beyond, right? Like most people would be tripping out. Especially if it is a supernova, and the way that that idea of like the crab, it was by the crab. But ironically enough, it looks like a crab, like kind of like. But it is interesting that the planet that we have discovered recently that looks like it has the same things that spark life here is in the constellation Leo heading over, right? Like just over. All life will be in those first signs. You're never going to find life except evil, dark life. And this doesn't mean anything about your sun sign or your rising. In the south from Scorpio to Pisces. That's where the bad things come. That's where the bad things live. That's where the reptilians live. That's where all the bad. That's why you see Saturn. If you have Saturn in Libra all the way to Pisces, you'll always be on top of your game, successful. If you were born, I teach in my Saturn class, if you have Saturn in Aries all the way through, it's a lot harder to stay on top. Right? So like, the bad things come from down there. And that's not just south for northern hemisphere, that's south in the understanding as well celestially from our sun, right? And watching like Pluto is getting ready to go out of bounds as well, which is very weird, right? So like that's also not going to happen. again in our lives, or even the next time it comes into Aquarius 250 years from now. There's something about the orbit of this Pluto that's, it's going to be, I forgot how many hundreds of years away. Like, it's a long time away to see Pluto go out of bounds of declination from a geo point of view. We're already seeing it all the way south. We're already seeing it out of view. Like, we can't see it, of course. Like, when it came up above the horizon celestially, or from that understanding of the celestial equator, that's because it finally popped up in 1930, and we took a photographic, picture of it, and we thought it was massive. The opposite, where it went down now, was 2018 and 2019. Then the Saturn-Pluto conjunction happened out of sight. That's why COVID, everything was hidden and dark, and all the occulting of the moons, and why Jeffrey Epstein got arrested in 2019, not just for the sex stuff, but also for wanting to seed all of humanity with his DNA. And those were all the private meetings happening that, like, me or Michael Luton used to talk about. And every time the moon went into Capricorn from 2018 to 2020 was dark, hidden people in secret meetings doing dark shit. So if you buy anything that was sold during any of that time, you were part of their plan, So all the bad things come down there. That's why I didn't use Libra, because there is that it can go bad or it can go really good.
The tipping point.
Right? There's but there is something from Scorpio to Pisces. There is no good. And I'm talking about those stars. And I'm talking about those.
You're not talking
I'm not
about
talking about the people or their sun
with the
signs.
It's just how people would have interpreted the sky.
Correct.
And how, traditional astrology.
But that's where Vedic will put a good thing. But even their good thing, like my Jupiter's in Sag and Vedic and Capricorn and Western, it's in Mula. That you would think Jupiter in its home sign in Mula would be great. No, it's more like Kali. Kali is one of the energies of the rulers. It's also, it's about, if you're a great teacher or a great learner, you can't be connected to anything physical. And it's here to destroy everything to be a great teacher and learn. And you have to get to the roots. It's called about being at the roots. And then Mula, it's the destroyer. That the only way you can understand life is when you're fully destroyed and at the root of something that you actually learn and understand. So even there, it shows you that Jupiter's greatest placement, Sagittarius, the very beginning, Mula is destroying energy, but it's beautiful in the way that it gets you the roots. It's all this destroyer energy in the south. It's just, but all the signs try to put a lighter thing, but the Chinese were right too. Like, yeah, that would be a weird, freaky ass tortoise snake in that area of Pisces and Aquarius, right? Some weird ass hybrid, freaking slow but sneaky ass energy. And if it would have came there, we would have been like, uh-oh. But of course it came in a sign of where the heavens are and the divine and the Pleiades and more beautiful aspects of things. So yeah, it's pretty wild, but I love it. Yeah. But that was a crazy
this is
show.
A mind-blowing one. Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say that whatever conclave action we see here is going to either widen the east and west of Christendom, or if I was to put my bet on it, I'm going with my original gut from 2 weeks ago, that it's going to be a disruptive pope who tries to bring those two back together through Russia, doesn't care about Ukraine, and blows people's minds while something starts to appear celestially that blows our mind, and a discovery about our roots historically. That's the same way that everybody around the world saw that supernova. Everybody in the world has some trace of humanity that's revealed that they can find everywhere else, that they don't tell us, or that we finally do discover. And it will also simultaneously be with a celestial event that's within our solar system and without at the same time, outside of it too. It'll be both. It'll be all of it at the same time. It'll be like, wait, what?
Right.
That's my prediction.
Well, I can't wait, because we have been living through historically unprecedented times nonstop. So I just think it's fascinating. I really have no words because, like I said, this one was mind blowing, and it's amazing to me how these things converge.
Right.
You know, wish I had something more exciting to say, but I don't have anything to wrap
Well,
this
like,
one up.
well, like especially like with the episodes that you and I've done. So I just launched Hypergate.ai with Jim.
Oh, right, yeah.
And so last year, you remember I was talking to you about this. We actually were going to call it Prophetica and build, and we still could build a Prophetica version of it. But like the work that you and I've done together in mixing that with the AI to understand history, but also put people in their own charts and refer it to all these historical people that are they're more related to, kind of like how Astro Theme works, but way more intense, and then put them through the experience and where were their wrong turns, and are you going to make that turn? You're going through the same transit they went through, and they're the most similar to you ever. Stuff like that, but also just to learn how to do prophecy work and look at history and stuff. That's the fun part that we get to start moving into training Hypergate with.
Yeah,
And
I think at the beginning of this evening or afternoon even, when we started working on this and we were talking about using AI and how when you use AI, you don't just say, oh, AI,
oh yeah,
can you draw me my chart or whatever, right? It's all about interacting with it and collaborating. That's what I keep thinking about. Because AI will never, or maybe it will get to the point where it's like, what was that character in Star Trek? Data or whatever, was he a robot? I mean, I don't know, or an android. I'm sorry, I don't know that whole the show, but maybe we'll get to the point where there's someone who can be rational and reason and think of all these questions. But right now where we are is that you need people who are going to ask the questions and figure out how to work with this. But you were showing me the Hypergate AI earlier, and the coolest part about it is when you do the voice on it, it sounds like you. It's so funny.
I mean, I think that's cool. I think my excitement about it is the fact that we're the first astrology app and AI. And when I mean app, not mobile app, that's what we're working on, but also mobile apps are going to be retired here in the next year with what's being announced next month by Apple. That's going to be called legacy apps because everything's moving to AI. So basically, you're going to just have AI applications. That's what it is, right? That integrate into ChatGPT or Grok or whoever makes deals with whoever. And Apple's made their deal with OpenAI, and now even Google's making their little mini deal with Apple right now. But my excitement is taking like the work that you and I have done and starting the training on prophecy, historical references, and really allowing the algorithm of all the astrology and the teachings I've done with just the math of basic astrology, right? And now that it knows how to do it how I do, but actually start to predict for the world events, people, and also just try and understand how what we're doing for people to do on their own. Like, especially if they'll like to be able to have somebody to run their chart and the AI to go, okay, there's of course everything right now, right? We're the only ones where every day, any minute, any second, it's not like CoStar or like the pattern where it's like all preset through software. It's like, no, the astrology of this moment with the planets all where they're at to your exact chart, and it's running it and it's in the moment and it's telling you what's going to happen and what's in it. And it's all the training, how I've done it for all these years. But imagine then going, the last time somebody went through something like this with your alignments and the alignments of now was 700 years ago.
Exactly.
And in that moment, this was happening, and that same person was going through this. Do you feel like you're going through this now? Do you want to know what they chose, or would you rather not know? Or do you want to know so you know the direction that the recommendation is not what I'm going to tell you what to do, but here's what would have been the path if they would have chose the other direction or this direction, but this was the one they chose. And this is what the aftermath was. I mean, that's where none of these astrologers out there are thinking that way.
Yeah, I know.
No, they're not even ready.
But I mean, that's the thing. That's what I've been thinking that I'd like to work with people on too, is to help advise them looking at historical people and events and looking at their charts and the transits they're experiencing now and connecting them with those people. Because to me, you know, what's interesting about it is that there is not one interpretation anymore. And we've talked about that before. It used to be that you had the emperor had his astrologer or astrologers, and they come in, they do the interpretations, come in and tell the emperor, and the emperor's got that information.
Right.
And he gave everybody permission to do that. Or the kings later on.
Or
in
the
Europe,
Pope at 1345.
Yeah, they have their astrologers. Now we're to the point where if it's used correctly and harnessed correctly and all the data is put in that helps you see that, now you can come in with your own questions and figure it out. And that's the thing, the judicial astrology, that was always illegal in the past.
Yeah,
right?
or
it was always, we don't want people to be able to tell their own history and figure out their own destiny.
Or reoccurring astrology was illegal too, which is what Nostradamus was doing, was going, well, let me look back 500 years and see what happened with all these Saturn ingresses into Aries. You can't, astrologers laughed at him. What do you mean? The same thing ain't going to happen. So ironically, my question to you is, do you maybe know when the historical term that we use today of like history repeats itself started?
Oh, I used to know a quote. From, I mean, it goes way, way back, that idea of there being cycles of history.
Right.
It used to be why history was studied. And as a historian going through graduate school, I'll tell you that we just learned about the development of history as a profession. But now that I know you and we've done all of this, and I've done some of the research looking even at the history of astrology, I know that history was always connected to astrology.
Right.
Because that's the only way you could actually identify the cycles. Where do the cycles begin and end? And then to do the analysis. And I'm sure chroniclers, you know, they're not keeping records just because they want to be able to tell people, look how great I am, right? They're keeping the records as part of their larger science. I mean, I don't know what other word to say, or their method of maintaining power, of demonstrating why they should be in power. And you're always going to connect it to the other patterns that these people noticed, right?
Yeah, because that's where it's a weird time period, that 1500s, especially during Henry VIII into the 1550s with, you know, Henry's reign ending and James coming up after Elizabeth, right? It was Elizabeth's time where it was more free reign, but not in France, not with the Catholic Church, which was connected to it. So like Elizabeth got to like, John Dee got to have a fun time as an astrologer because Elizabeth was so not connected to the Catholic ways that she allowed a court astrologer. But even though Nostradamus was a court astrologer for Henry in France, the second, right? Or was it the seventh? I forgot. It was one of them. Or the second. Okay, right. He wasn't allowed to do stuff because the Catholic Church was breathing down the Henry II's neck. So, that's what worries me about this whole Christian Dorium thing is like I think the proof's in the pudding in 1054. They wouldn't even record it, but they guaranteed recorded it. It's in the Vatican library somewhere, but the Eastern Orthodox put it on a coin secretly like we do in our money system stuff. So like that's where it's like, okay, how can I create the AI to be like way more about esoteric, spiritual prediction, understanding your past, and continuing to be evolutionary astrology, but way faster in using the tools. Because my example is CoStar tells me sometimes that it's a good day just to wear stilettos. Like, it's just like, so, I'm sorry, but I don't wear stilettos. So it just shows you there's no intelligence or no human understanding of what they're selling you. Or I like the pattern, it's more spiritual, but it also is like, okay, you're in this period for 6 months and you'll see that for the whole 6 months, and you'll read the 1 or 2 lines or pay extra money for the paragraph that they're going to talk on the voiceover with for that whole 6 months, and that's all you get.
Well, that's the point probably, is that they want you to think astrology is just about,
It's
you
just
know,
crazy.
like, oh, how's this day going to be? Am I going to do okay at work? Is my boss going to get mad at me? Am I going to find my my partner today, or whatever it is? So it gets you focused on all of the superficial things, and you don't see these significant, powerful. Well, we don't see these significant and powerful transits either, because, you know, half of the people who are scientifically analyzing the world are not, 99% of them have no connection to the idea of the divine, or they're not looking for larger patterns like that. Right?
Right. So like somebody in the chat's like, I can't believe Alex Jones and the Leo King are for AI. And I'm going to use the John Dee example. Same astrology. The problem with being afraid of something new, for example, scrying. Nostradamus did it, John Dee did it. Both claim to be quote unquote Christian, right? Even though Nostradamus was Jewish, he followed what the church was saying through being on the court and all that stuff, right? John Dee got to do some of the most amazing astrological work that's ever been done still to this day. Nobody has created a monad, which it's a holographic, you're supposed to even wear it to bring the whole universe into one symbol, right? And understand way more than that, how the math works, how the whole matrix of this whole universe works, and the whole system, and all alchemy done in like this scientific way that blows any kind of AI today out of the water idea. And be able to go free and go talk to angels through cryptography, using scrying with stuff that came from the Aztecs, right? Yeah. That he was only able to get because of somehow his well connections up with Queen Elizabeth, and I'm sure some deal done with somebody that was in Spain that had been there. However it was, the problem is Nostradamus was limited in his whole entire prophecies book as secret under a secret under a secret, because he's not allowed to put it out or else he could die. So all the way until the end of, and so for some reason when John Dee comes back after being with Edward Kelly and he's talking to angels and all the recordings and all that stuff, his library has been stolen when he comes back. When his mom's died and he gets to take over the property where the library is, it's all taken away. So obviously everybody wanted his stuff. Then James comes in and he has to make an apology because James goes crazy Christian, and that's when it ends for him and he ends up broke. I look at this moment as, oh my God, this is astrology's moment to do this esoteric work that goes beyond and takes it to the farther place. A lot of people are afraid of AI in all the weirdest and wrong ways. It's happening whether you like it or not. The infrastructure of it right now is every business that's even surviving has it. So you might as well be the one doing the great work with it and the good work with it. And I live in a country where it actually is the foundation of it, meaning if it was like Queen Elizabeth II, where we don't have a church like the Catholic Church overseeing or judging or telling us we can't do it, I'm going to do astrology and I'm going to do it on these crazy frontiers. And I've always been that way. To try and deny yourself of that is putting yourself to be like all the other astrologers who could barely write it because they weren't allowed to and not speak how they really wanted to express themselves. So as an astrologer, to not go into, not down a hole, but to not go into finding the expression, which is astrology itself, through means that could help people in ways and understand the universe and understand everything faster, better, and make your life and make other people's lives better. I'm always going to do that no matter what the tool is or what the thing is. It's insane to me for people to even try, and it's so, I don't know how to say it, but geez, you want to talk about going backwards into the Stone Age? That idea of like, I'm so afraid of it. Same thing with vehicles. So you probably drive in a car because everybody fought against cars because where are we going to put all the horses? I bought a buggy for my horse. So just be one of those old people that's still riding on a horse while everybody's going to be flying by in a car until one day when you're really old, you're going to be like, okay, I guess I'll get on AI now. I'm stuck using my old Windows 10, which they don't support anymore. And I'm stuck using the old Apple that doesn't work anymore. I'm stuck using this old Android because I don't want to be on Apple because, well, they're all using AI. So I'm using this old LG phone and I'm staying on this old thing. And you're just going to be, bye.
We always need those people who are doing the old thing because it's interesting, right? It's like in the old movies where there's always the guy who's still riding his horse and buggy through town, and meanwhile there's the Model Ts going around, or actually it would be like the 1930s vehicles going.
Right.
But, you know, those people, they are remnants from another time, and they have a voice and teach people about the old ways too. But you become more like a relic than a living, breathing human, you know.
Well, I think that's like, you know, somebody's like, well, John Dee hung out with Edward Kelly and Edward Kelly got his wife pregnant. It's like, okay, John Dee had more than one wife. And if that's your excuse about the whole thing, about some personal relationship thing, it's like, do you think it's from scrying, or do you think it's just because John Dee just couldn't stop that itch he couldn't scratch about trying to understand talking to angels through cryptography and through using crystal balls that were used to take symbolisms in their own language that they created? It's a lot more than just the scrying. It was also taking an angel language that he created with Edward Kelly and using cryptography and using the true understanding of like a magic ball or a crystal ball was to decode it and to be able to see letters upside down, other directions and all that stuff. Like, until you're really well versed on it, which maybe that person is, I'm not trying to say you're not. Like, if you're going to use like a personal experience about something that happens in everyday life to like 90% of people have had, I don't think maybe somebody gets your wife impregnated, but you know, personal relationship stuff, especially he was an interesting guy who literally, like, you know, go look at his chart. You know, like, that guy definitely, without John Dee, I hate to say it, but the movement against the religious factions that have always tried to take astrology down, the formation of Rosicrucians, the formation of the true hidden Illuminati that was always against the church, it comes from people like John Dee, like literally, and Robert Flood. And these guys are the ones who gave the knowledge to have Galileo make a telescope using astrological actual geometry and find and see that we don't live on a fucking flat earth, and write the first book that actually shows and draws out the pictures of the craters of the moon and the lunar cycles. And literally didn't realize, but he also saw the moons of Jupiter and he found Neptune before anybody without even knowing it. So like the idea to go and what you're trying to say is, don't do this because what's going to happen? What's the bad things? Like, nobody can give me the bad thing that's going to happen. But,
because it's a demon. Right?
So it's the same way that everybody put Galileo in jail for using a telescope and saying the earth isn't round. Like, hello, or the earth is flat. Like, hello, go look at the fucking lunar cycle with a telescope that you made yourself before people were making telescopes, using astrology as it. And call it the starry messenger as assigned to Mercury in astrology and Hermeticism. I mean, so basically, whether it's me or the next person after me, if you're not going to do that, then there is no Galileo. If there's no Galileo without Robert Flood, and there is no Robert Flood and John Dee without the people that came prior to him, there is none of that. So it's insane to me because it's the same astrology we're coming into. That's like, whatever is going to be the next Galileo, is only going to come through going in the direction of trying the new things and going out the limits and not being so afraid, because really your fear of it is based upon Christianity. So that's where you got to look at your own fear, right? Like, I'm sure if Jesus was here, he would have been like, that's some dope ass shit. Let's see what we can do. I want to teach people how to heal better. So, like, I just think it's funny. It's just like, it's coming from love. It's coming from, there's so many people who have fought so hard through all those times to get to this moment, and people don't even realize it. When I was on TV in 2009 doing astrology and having the mainstream media, the only one in the world with I'm being blasted by the mainstream media for doing astrology and that I'm a kook, a nut. Nobody thought it was cool. Nobody. And then when my YouTube pops up, it starts to become cool. And the trend starts because of me doing that. So guess what? I stick with the things that aren't cool in the moment, and they're going to become cool. And then everybody's going to jump on the bandwagon.
Well,
that's my rant.
Yeah. It always takes someone to blaze the trail and to get things, to figure out how to use the new tools. And that's, I don't remember what you were saying before about your Saturn or something, right? I don't know what it is in your chart, but I think that's obviously one of your roles. And that's why for you personally, you need to always evolve, because you're obviously setting a standard and moving things into a certain direction.
It would just be that, as Michael Luton would say, David, you're an exalted being. Your sun's in Leo, your moon's in Taurus, your Mars is in Scorpio. And when he told me, you're here to breed, it was more than children. It was creating things, no matter what it is, that it's always being brought into the light. So if I was a sun in Aquarius, like a detriment sun with a moon in Scorpio and a Mars in Taurus, that's the opposite of me. Not saying that it's bad, but it's here to not, it has to pay attention. Like, is it creating something that's from good? Or maybe it's too afraid to do it, where I'm not afraid to do it, and I know it's good.
Yeah. Well, that's the variable
right?
part of this whole picture. Is that is why you can believe, okay, this is the dark part of the zodiac, or this is the exalted placement and all of that. But you need all the people with all of those placements on Earth at the same time to be able to move things forward and to create history.
Of course.
Right?
So some people are getting the history wrong, saying, well, scrying was the end of John Dee. Ruined his life. My grandma did scrying and brought on bad things. So you're trying to say that his Ouija board of the 1570s and 80s ruined his life? Or was it the fact that when he came back, his library was gone? And so that would be detrimental to any astrologers. Then Queen Elizabeth puts him in charge of Cambridge University and helping with all the Cambridge stuff, or Oxford.
Well,
it was Oxford.
He had to go
right. So then he becomes, and then he had to go through the witch trials and be there to help understand the witch trials and make sure that people don't go crazy, right? So actually, ironically, the guy who's scrying is the guy helping in the witch trials, making sure that the witches aren't being wrongly accused. Then he is the head of Oxford to try and fix Oxford University for the Queen near the end. And then James comes in, who is extremely wanting to go backwards to old Christianity, and he wrote the book of demonology. So anybody who did astrology, James decimated his life, made him publicly make an apology letter to use him and to make everybody scared, which made the pilgrimage in 1620 happen. So everybody has it way incorrect. That didn't ruin his life. If anything, James ruined his life. And all the people that are like you in here that are so afraid and are going to be the next King James and start doing things that people are going to get on boats and fucking leave.
And because they're going to start something totally new. So
exactly,
that's good that there will be something new from the people reacting against it. But I just want to say people should, question the narrative that you believe in the first place, Because a lot of time, I mean, what if John Dee wasn't scrying, but he had to hide the fact that he was doing astrology all
Like
night long?
Nostradamus.
You know, and maybe maybe it was more acceptable at that time to say, oh, I'm scrying and there's an angel language and da-da-da. I mean, I don't know what all was going on, and I'm sure there was something going on, and it would have been a really boring time to live. So he needed to have some excitement, he and John Kelly, and they were figuring out their new way of life. I don't know what it is, but the thing is that we have to not just believe every story we're told, because what's the authority that tells us the story that connects scrying, that John Dee's scrying in this way and it was the end of him because it was a demon or whatever? We have to just think about, well, where did that story come from, and is that valid evidence as well? I always think what the kinds of things we're talking about, it has to be a more hermetic space.
Correct.
Where we have to be able to understand things without the fear, right? We can acknowledge, all right, the way things are set up is there's good and bad, and some people are going to be in a particular area of life or whatever, but they're all still fulfilling a purpose. It doesn't mean we have to become like that. It means these are the kind of challenges that we signed up for, and we can stay in our light. We can stay grounded ourselves. But it's just that if you don't question something or think about what's happening because of fear, which is happening a lot more lately, it's not always, people aren't being instilled with fear because of godly reasons. It's just people are afraid to even put themselves out there and have an opinion because they're afraid of what will happen. And it's that fear that's the thing that shuts you down. So, you know, I just believe everyone can protect themselves. Everyone can find protection and do those steps, whatever it is that we feel works best for us according to our traditions, religious, philosophical, whatever it is. But asking questions needs to continue, and exploring things, that's not the problem. Sorry, that's my soapbox.
I think I love those thoughts because it's so well put, and I love exactly everything. I agree with what you're saying because it's important for people to remember these are times where that fear, you can't let it rule your life. I think what happens is then you become afraid of like, well, if I put that out, like imagine being right now a Benny Johnson, a right-wing reporter online who's really big, who promotes Christianity, and he has the story of a life that's going to expose some truth and how to make freedom better. But, oh no, astrology's involved. He's not going to put it up.
Yeah.
The last thing that guy wants to do is to have all of his friends and all the other right-wing people, you talked about astrology? So if I go back to when John Dee and his communication with the spirits, and I read that whole book, and I went through it and bought my own King James Bible, if you remember, Ann.
Yeah.
And then I went and looked at the passages in Apocrypha of the King James Bible that it points to being able to communicate to spirits. And why is Apocrypha the book that is in the middle of the Old Testament and the New Testament, that was in the Geneva Bible and in the King James Bible, but then gets removed, right? And why is it not in there anymore? Well, maybe because it's more spiritual, and those are the books that the canon law, the Catholic Church, didn't approve. And what's interesting is in there is more of the ideas of spirituality. It doesn't refer to as much of the Johns and the Daniels it doesn't get into that as much. It gets into being able to heal your soul. Like it's actually more of the teachings that are the hidden teachings of how to be spiritual that I would say that probably Jesus probably would have used. And what's interesting is that was what was discovered. That was why the reckoning came down on John Dee, because when he did publish his findings, it made people looking into Apocrypha and blew the lid off of this whole idea of New Testament, that's King James Version, that comes in where he's putting himself, because now he's part of the Church of England, into the genealogy that's connected to everybody that's in the Bible. Mm-hmm. But Apocrypha doesn't do that. So people have to like get a little bit and do it themselves. I don't know if you remember, Ann, I was up till literally 8 a.m, for those years doing Hypergate schools. And I have an old 1623, the last year King James was alive, that he published it. That's what makes that one worse so much, because it was the last King James Bible he was alive. Wasn't the 1611, but it was the 1623, the last year, and then he died. So it's the last one with, you know, his publishers and editors and the stamps and all that. That was while he was still alive, and honoring him as king. So what's crazy is I'm standing there and I'm going through all of John Dee and Edward Kelly's work, and John Dee is recording most of that because he was really smart and using things that you have to learn through the hieroglyphic monad or monus hieroglyphica and understand. I mean, everything, even like a triangle, means D, right? Like, okay, it's the fourth letter, right? All these kind of things that you learn through all of his old work. But I'm going through it, and then I'm up at night and I'm going through Apocrypha, and I'm finding a passage that, like, Angel Raphael tells him in a passage, and what he needs to pay attention to, and they're in the middle of some Eastern European town on the, for weeks at a time, and they're not even moving until the angels tell them to move to the next place. It's crazy. But then it's like to get them finally to a message that's spiritual and more about God than it is about the fake God and the fake stuff. And even the angels in there tell him that there is a lot of the fake stuff within the church and all that stuff. And of course, if you're going to publish that, they're all going to come after you. So the narrative that people get is exactly what they want people to think. Well, he died penniless. Who cares? Like, does that mean anything in life? Like, that's what they want you to. You should die with money. What are you going to do with it? That's so Egyptian. Like, you need to now pay because you just died and you're going on the Knicks and you're going to go meet with the sticks, and you better have your money in order to get into the afterlife. Retarded. So that's where people have to really, like, read the whole book that he published. All of it in the original text version of his writing of it and the publishing, which I bought that original. And it's amazing because at the end of it, you have to question if you're on the wrong side or not on both ways. And as you said, be hermetic. And a lot of that work is you can't read that book without doing something yourself. And they don't put the passage in Apocrypha, but they'll look in Apocrypha and look at this verse that's based only in this area of Apocrypha. And you have to have the old Geneva version, which I have too, but I used the King James version. And it was interesting because it was like, oh, and I did have the Geneva, and I looked and it was the same text, just a little bit more fun to read in an old King James. And it's like, oh my gosh. They're talking about spirits and how you are in a bad space based off where you are spiritually, how to heal yourself spiritually, how to eat spiritually, how to do these things spiritually. The Bible doesn't teach that stuff. The way that we talk about it in New Age comes from like Apocrypha stuff and John Dee, which is wild because, people are in here following it and being like, oh, they were conjuring up demons. That's not what John Dee came at the end of the book. The reason why people say that is in his apology letter to King James, he had to say whatever it was because guess who made the book of demonology and was obsessed with witches and was psychotic and schizophrenic and seeing things that weren't there? King James. So his apology letter he knowingly goes, this guy's a fucking obsessed demon freak who thinks anything getting in his way is a demon, including if he can't get to his wife that he's about to marry on the other side of the ocean, that the witches are conjuring up the fucking winds. Like, that's so psycho. So he writes the apology letter that makes sure that he doesn't die, because he did get arrested under Mary, who was another one who tried to go backwards. So if people want to spit and have a debate about John Dee all day or the future of astrology, you're talking to the guy who that's what he does. Tell me somebody else who's doing that. Tell me somebody else who's actually doing it as an astrologer and actually applying it and actually has the AI app that you can actually use and already is going there. Nobody else. And has all that research and all the schools. And Hypergate.ai is not because it's just Hypergate. It's because I taught Hypergate schools. And it wasn't just me. It was amazing other people around the world that did these schools. We all did it together about prophecy work, about the deeper esoteric parts of astrology that go way beyond what's your sign, what's your sun sign, what's your transit. That's so kindergarten compared to where astrology really lies. And the secrets and the hidden codes that are embedded in all of that stuff. And also that were published freely for you to figure out hermetically or not, which most people do. So I'm not afraid of that future at all. And I think this is a great history lesson looking at 1054, 1534. Like everybody called Henry, oh my God, you're betraying the faith. You were the defender of the faith. Now you're the betrayer. You should thank him. But no, everybody remembers because he chopped some heads of some of his wives. Not that he left the Catholic Church, right? Nobody talks about that. Not that, oh, he was the guy who actually got rid of the monasteries. He's the guy who actually really kind of at the end of that, it's like no more does he put claim on France anymore, right? Because there was that whole like, no, England has claim over France, and then, right? Like, it's like after Henry VIII, the world changes enough to where we start to see it move in a direction that splits away from this crazy Latin idea of the Catholic Church that the Eastern Orthodox Church did in 1054. And that's why we always say they're East. And then kind of write them off for whatever they're doing over there. What are those crazy Russians doing? What are those crazy people in the East doing? But if you're in the West, you're in an English-speaking energy or anything like that, you're in Spain, you're in, oh gosh, you're going against God, you know? So I just think that's where, you know, we're back there again, and it's evidenced by what people are saying. Which is kind of sad because it's like that, you know, if you do that history and do it, I mean, it might take a long time, but oh my gosh, when you go live in the history of that route and that road and how magical it was, and we're in that astrology that John Dee came up in, that all of them got that wave of energy that pushed it in, you would never say that. You would actually be like, oh my God, because you would understand it fully. You'd be like, geez, I do not want to be and turn into, which I would say, which is the worst astrologer of all time, which is William Lilly, that comes in the next century in the 1600s and is the most boring astrologer of all time and only speaks in the basic understandings of like, are you going to die at sea or are you going to do this, right? Because he can't go into the spiritual and the magical parts. And then he can't even have the guts on when after the Civil War and Charles I dies and Charles II, he gets to do the coronation. He gets to find the chart for it, and it's a bad chart. He doesn't have the balls to fully be like, if you really want to be king, you're going to be the first king after a civil war and the people killed Charles I. We should do it on a different date. But no, too afraid to say that. So what you get is most astrologers too afraid to do anything in the world. And you get a William Lilly who people like revere, but it's like even his terms in astrology, even when I look at his essential dignities, I don't use that. I use Ptolemy. At least that guy had balls. Lilly has no balls. So.
Historically, I don't know whether that's true or not, but
just the writings, like
right.
How the astrology is taught. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't know. I just feel like here's what my takeaway from this episode is, that 1054 happened. There was a supernova, lasted 23 days. People were freaking out in the church, excommunicating each other. And you know what? Everybody lived and had ancestors, and we're still here. So if something does happen on June 25th or beginning then, that we all around the world see some kind of a natural occurrence or whatever it is, I just hope people will be mindful of, and in anything, and I mean, maybe this is a fractured one where we all see something different, but at the same time, or we're all swept up in some sort of ideology, that I think the lesson is to not be swept up in the ideology that has you seeing someone else as less than human, or I don't even know what Roman Catholics were thinking of the others, except for
you're left behind,
right? Or the aspect of you're not going to be saved because you're doing it wrong. You've got the wrong bread, and we're all going to die because you don't have leavened bread or unleavened, whatever it
Right.
was, right? No, we're not all going to die because of the bread. That's all I have to say.
No, and the scary
Unless it's
part,
poisoned.
the scary part about that, but the truth that you just said is like, for people to really do that, the conditioning of all religions think unless it's their way, right? So everybody's left behind with evil if they're not following that religion. Jews believe that, we're going to be back in the power, and when the Elohim comes back, like Muslims believe you're not with Muhammad, so you're not going up into paradise, and you're not going to do that either. And same thing goes, if you're not Christian, you're going to be left behind with the Jews, the Gentiles, and the Muslims, and the atheists, and the Bill Maher's. Right? Like, that's the truth. So I have no problem loving all people and just saying, hey, don't push your religion on me. Let me just do what I got to do.
And it also includes, the other thing is, on the other angle is if someone wants to say Christ is king or whatever it is, that's fine too, right?
Yeah, people are allowed to do whatever they want.
Because you see it a lot in the other way too. But because you have the right to express your belief system, the important thing to protect is we want to continue to have the right to express who we are on some level or what our beliefs are, but not expect other people to just, okay, I'm automatically converted now because you said that.
Right.
We all have our ways that we believe, and if we're in public, if we're publicly judging people, and I'm not saying this, I don't even have the chat open right now. I don't know what people are saying, so I hope nobody takes it as a direct anything towards what anyone's saying. But I'm just saying that myself, it's just getting to the point where, or it has been at this point, and it's not just religion, where we're not allowed to express our beliefs, and
Right.
and just protect that ability for other people. I don't know, but I think I feel good about whatever is going to happen on that Saturn return of the supernova. I think I know you're probably sitting there thinking, these non-astrologers,
No.
but I feel like it is a momentous time, and that we have to focus on what we know is truth, or exploring things from our angle, right? That let's do that and not be distracted by whatever else is going on. Because the astrology also says there's going to be a massive distraction at that point you've never seen before. This new pope,
It's
he
already
might go
happening.
over to Moscow and excommunicate Putin, or he could go and reconcile, right?
Yeah,
So-
I think
And
the
we'll
distractions
also
are all
live.
happening right now. I think, why are the Epstein things not out? It takes James O'Keefe to finally get the video to actually give you a confirmation that Prince Andrew was having sex with little kids. Like, okay, that just got revealed, and the mainstream media is nowhere to be found. And it's the actual guy who wrote in the Daily Mail who was the guy who was supposed to say, and I know that he didn't do it, and the guy and then actually he was the one who was sleeping with his wife, and right, like, okay, this goes way deeper than people actually think, and I think people go, well, we already knew this. No, nobody knew that. Mm-hmm. Nobody knew that till today. So the distractions are already happening, right? So it's like that's where, and what it's creating is it's breeding upon the fears. If you do this, if you do that, it's like trying to keep everybody the way that's how popes did it. That's how presidents do it. That's how kings, queens, prime ministers, the Fed, everybody's doing that right now. So when I see somebody tell me, oh my God, I don't agree with it, that's fine. You can not agree with it, and I'm not mad at you. But maybe think about why you disagree with actually doing the thing that they're actually not trying to distract you to do. They're trying to distract you to be afraid of it. That's the irony. Even the mainstream media is like, this is kind of scary. Oh, okay. That's what they said about COVID.
Or scary, or
I know.
or why would we print that? That's not news. Like, who cares about Andrew? It's like, on this thing, it's who cares about it? But if Andrew was doing something they agree
Even
with,
AI,
then that
though.
would be news.
Even AI.
What, that AI is...
The media is saying, you don't see positive media reports about AI. All you see is states and people, and all these people freaking out. Oh my God, it's the devil. It's going to end the world. It's gonna make it. And movies and everything is all destruction, and it's going to take over. It's the next Skynet. It's this, it's that. You have everybody so afraid.
And if people believe that, then go ahead, believe it.
Believe
Then you also have to accept the narrative that goes with that, which would be become dumber so that you can accept what AI creates by itself as good art, because it's not good art when you do it. If you say to AI, write a poem, it doesn't know anything, right? It's just going to do rhyming words. It hasn't experienced the sunlight or whatever you're feeling. All of those things are things you have to tell it about, and then it can help you write a poem. So I just, it is very similar to Salem witch trial times, right? And we've already done a show on that, where we had Neptune going through Pisces, and then Neptune in Aries, where the Puritans, it got ramped up during Neptune and Pisces, and then it still finally ended in Neptune and Aries. But it was a similar thing of, don't listen to these, or I don't even know what it was.
I know,
but it was all the kids. Like, the kids have demons.
My sixth grade grandmother, Mary, fucking died as the last witch killed.
So let's not do that.
Mary Parker.
But we're not going to. I just feel like armed with the information and knowledge, then we're all going to be able to make it through, but also maybe make a difference and not fall for the same kinds of tactics.
No, but they should be afraid of me because I am Dr. Hypergate.
Exactly.
And I am after you.
Oh, brother.
I am Dr. Hypergate.
But why do you need your dog tags?
It's taking a picture that I can make it look like me more than the version that it likes to make me look, which is like it like helps me guarantee it better, but I could have it remove the dog tags. But it's like,
I hope you have
at least when we're going, or here, I made this one for the Gen Z Pluto Sages. Because this is what the astrology says. The influencer dream's over. Gen Z, are you ready for war? Where else do you think they're all going? The economy's gone for them. The Chinese goods are gone. This is gone. What happened with Pluto and Aquarius last time? War. What happened within the old days? There's nothing around. There's no more church left for you. There's nothing. Oh my God, where am I going? I love that I have it like, oh, I'm taking my boyfriend into the Revolutionary War. Oh, there's George Washington. Are you ready for war, Pluto Sag? This is what I've been saying for a long time. Look at all the universities right now. Crisis. So, I'm surprised that this AI hurt everybody so much. Or was it, you're hurt because I made it? That's like so if it's a harmful thing, is this picture harming anybody, or is it because of what I'm putting on the picture and how I'm describing it, so it's actually me harming the person?
It reminds me.
That's the question.
When we talked about photography, it was a similar thing. When that was a new technology, and people were suspicious of that. And then they started using it, though. The other side is people started using that to try to prove, like, oh, look at, there's a ghost behind you in this seance picture, so pay this much money and I'll help you. Let's keep doing the communion, right? Like, people can use it for their own purposes. So that's why I say be one who's using it yourself and who knows about it and who will look at a picture and be able to say, oh, that's AI, right?
Yeah, or during the times we just talked about, there was no Western astrology. It was in the Middle East. But the Holy Wars start, and the only people exchanging info and not trying to say they destroyed this library or that they have this info are the astrologers. So that's when Western astrologers go, hey, what are you talking about? What? Oh, we added all these Arabic parts. We get all these new things. Oh, thanks.
So suddenly they open up all
And
these
so you have to be willing to be
scriptoriums
open
and
to go talk to the
universities.
side where they're all fighting, because that's how it continued. There was this huge gap from the Charlemagne time up until the fucking Holy Wars in the 1200s of Western astrology. Only those that were Templars and knew, right? But they had to talk to the Muslims that were in the Holy Wars to carry the info, because those shahs and all those guys would bring their like spiritual advisors and all them that had the knowledge, and then they would talk to the other side. So while everybody's going to go fight all these stupid, why God's right, Jesus is right, Muhammad's right, the Jewish tradition's right, all of the real astrologers are going to be like, hey, what are you learning over there? What are you bringing over here? And that's how your Western astrology you love so much survived. From getting it from the Arabs. But the Arabs, where's Arab astrology now? Islamic law bans it so hard that it only lives in places like America or in other, places with some sort of freedom of expression. But it's one of the smallest denominations of astrology now. Whereas in the times that we've talked about, it was the highest number that was holding it together. So, like that's kind of one of those weird little moments where people have to kind of go, huh? Are we about to switch where all the Christians are going to get crazy again and be like, don't have any of that. Oh my God, the end of the world. Oh my God, the devil. Well, I just know during all these holy wars, I'm just going to be talking to astrologers on all sides. I don't care if you're Jew. I don't care if you're Catholic. I don't care if you're Muslim. I don't care. Because I don't judge anybody by off that. I actually don't judge anybody. I just, hey, you're all humans. Have fun wearing those little like weird little avatar suits that if you fall out of line, then you're not doing the right thing. And that's how it survived. And then that's why in the 1200s, as we brought up at the beginning, all those awesome cathedrals just stopped putting astrology in them. But that's at the same time that the Templar Knights are disbanded and killed. So, that's why you don't see cathedrals after like 1290 that were built have astrology, and the stained glass windows are carved into the actual like stone that's out on the floors. And
but what's interesting, and this is like something for another show, because I know we need to wrap up.
Yeah, we need to wrap up. Yeah.
We always are wrapping up and then we find something else.
I know.
But the sacred geometry of the cathedrals, I would say, in a way, probably the masons of the cathedrals were keeping those astrological principles alive in the architecture. And I'm talking about actual stone masons, not masons. But that's where the Freemasons, get the ideas about mathematics and astrology and everything is probably from stonemasons who had been using mathematics and geometry and just practical application of it in the construction of cathedrals.
Right.
So, anyway.
Well, and then that it's true, especially like some of the people that look for the Holy Grail have to go to those older sites to try to understand where it could have been hidden by Templar Knights. They have to go to those old Templar Masonics before the Masons, but those understanding of Templar cathedrals where there were Templars that were creating their own form of a church or a temple that they say that's where you can try to find where the Holy Grail is, if it so exists. But that's what's the interesting part, is like, all the religions, the people that are the most badass are in them doing the astrology, and then are the ones getting in trouble. So if you're not getting in trouble doing astrology, you ain't doing astrology. That's my answer. Somebody had wanted me to answer one question that I guess I've missed.
Okay.
So Why did astrology die in the Arabic countries? Islamic law. And Ann and I had covered Saladin, who was in charge of the Ottoman Empire. He was one of the great victors in the Holy Wars against the Christians. He killed one of the best spiritual advisors who did astrology and wrote some of the most amazing spiritual poems, and all of it, all because he was doing that. Which is really sad. At the oldest university in the world, because people have to remember the oldest school in the world that survived of all history is in the Middle East. So it's sad because like those places are just now, and especially like if you look at Iran, like, you know, it's got an Ayatollah. It's, you know, unless you're following a very hardcore conservative Muslim position that the Ayatollah has the bloodline of Muhammad, this is what kings of England and popes, they try to kind of, in their own weird way, try and connect themselves genetically or spiritually genetically to the direct descendant of Jesus or Muhammad or any of those people. So the reason why astrology died in the Muslim countries is because you'll be killed. You know, and that's where it's really like, if you're not Muslim and you touch a Quran, that's looked at as horrible and you can be killed for that. You're allowed to lie to people who are not Muslim. Every religion has their weird stuff.
Yeah, every religion.
You know, I'm not trying to be Islamophobic because it's
well,
more like,
they're not all like that. I
yeah.
mean, it's like, I don't even know if there is any kind of a crazy Christian state today, but there definitely have been. I mean, you could live in John Calvin's Geneva and be arrested for dancing, or even, that was one of the things that I did recently in a class. We looked at John Calvin's works, and it was, even if you looked like you were thinking about a song that was inappropriate, you could be, you know, brought forward into the court. So
Right.
Don't even look like you're thinking about music. I mean, it's just some religion, when it gets connected to the state or to the city or whatever it is, when you have that connection, it's just dangerous.
Yeah, and I will say that if you imagine living in the Dark Ages, it would have been different, 1300s, 14th century. In the 15th century and into the 16th century, and your library had a bunch of Arabic astrology books, and somebody saw it, and then they told somebody in a monastery about it. And then it went up from the priest to a bishop, and then that bishop contacted the Vatican and was like, we found a guy doing astrology, and he's not just doing it, but he's reading this old Arabic text. Remember the trauma of Christians with Muslims that's still playing out, and likewise, because of the Holy Wars, the Christians got decimated. Let's just be honest. So, the reason why it doesn't live in Muslim is because you have it from all sides within Muslim tradition, and anybody that would have been practicing it during those times that was not Muslim but had those books would have gone to the top of the list as demonic or the worst thing, because how dare you read anything that comes from those people who raped and pillaged and killed all of our Christians and made them slaves. Hence, Nostradamus burned all of his books. I think it's a good way to end it. So
Sounds good.
that was fun.
Yes, it was.
Maybe something different than a supernova, but something's going to show up and get all the people to be like, maybe it's going to be like how you see planes when they write on the sky, kind of like, I love you, marry me. It'll be like this celestial event where it's like, there's one God and I'm just one God, and don't name me off a person or people. I'm just an etheric divine understanding and love, and I love all of you, and none of the people that taught my love wanted to be put up as gods and deities. Sorry. God, that would change the whole world in a minute, but that won't be that way, but
yeah.
Because actually today confirmed to me, just looking at this astrology, like the split and just seeing how, gosh, the Russia-Ukraine thing, is it really about because of Russia being the old USSR and the breakaway in 91 and now the Ukraine wanted their independence? No. It's about Orthodox and then now you have a president that's aligning in the Nazis that are in there and all that, and they align with the Catholic Church. So, and who did that? Oh, Hitler did that too. So, and then you have, it's like, and where's Poland? Where they battle against the Catholic Church on their side? That's the first place that's always sacrificed. It's going to be weird. We'll see you on the next one. Adios. Bye-bye.
Monster.